we're all set.
All right, good evening. This is Lori Charlton, and I'd like to welcome everyone to the February 16th, 2022 special meeting of the Board of Finance held via WebEx. I'll call the meeting to order and ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, members of the public, you are encouraged to send comments during or after the meeting to the following email, bof@fairfieldct.org. As you would with live public testimony, please remember to include your name and address in your email. For members of the public who have called in to listen or joined the WebEx via your computer, please know that you're muted and will not be heard by board members, and there will be no live public comment until called for by the chair during the meeting. As it relates to live public comment, the agenda for tonight's meeting includes an informational presentation on capital needs for town facilities. The agenda also includes 2 voting items. That's items 4 and 5, relating to spending and bond authorizations for various non-recurring capital projects. Members of the public who would like to make a statement to the board in relation to either of those voting items, whether as a whole or in reference to any of the projects included therein, will have the opportunity to do so after management presents the relevant information and the board deliberates and prior to the board's votes. Comments will be limited to no more than 3 minutes per individual. All right, with that, I'll move to item 3, to hear and discuss a presentation of the report and plan to address life safety and other capital improvements in town-owned buildings. Can I have a motion to put this before us? Mr. DeWitt? Seconded by Mr. Testani. Okay, the motion is before us. For this item, the first selectwoman will kick off the presentation, and we also have with us Michelle Miller of Silver, Petroselli and Associates, who are the authors of the report that is in our backup. Madam First Selectwoman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I just want to kick it off by saying this is a report that we appropriated funding for, which we believe that we put forth through the town bodies, my administration, that we thought was an important document to have for all the town bodies to have and my administration to have, to be able to plan and understand what is going on in all of the town's buildings, to be able to break them out with the ADA, the safety, and other important issues that were happening, just so we could have a sense of what's going on. And I think it's an important thing for us to have. I know each of you, Jennifer sent the information to you so you could see it, but you did, I think, may have received that big report that has all the details in it. And I just want to thank Silver Petroselli for being on the line tonight, for making the time to be here to do the presentation. And also I want to acknowledge that our DPW Director, John Marsilio, is on the line, as well as James Ryan, who is our Chief Building Guy, who knows everything and takes care of all of our buildings very efficiently, I might add. So I'm just going to hand it over to them. And I just want to say before you do have the presentation that obviously this is there's a lot in this, and this is something that I'm hoping the working group that I talked about during the capital workshop, that when we put the smaller working group together, that we'll discuss this in more detail about how we're going to manage all of these items. Obviously the life safety issues are important and things we're probably going to have to do sooner than later, but obviously how we're going to bond and what we're going to do are things that I think will be productive conversations to have during that workshop meeting, where we can get a lot of that stuff done. So I just wanted to say that, and I will hand it over to our presenter. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Hello, I'm going to share my screen. See if I can do this. I actually want to share this because it's going to come over here in a second. Are you all seeing the screen now?
Not yet.
Oh, okay. I'm a little challenged sometimes with all this, so sorry. Bear with me a minute.
And I'll introduce Michelle Miller, who is the project architect and manager for the project. She is the one that's groping through the technology right now, and there you've got it, Michelle, all set.
I got it? Okay.
You've been introduced, so take it away.
Okay. Good evening. I'm from Silver Petrocelli. We're a 50-person architectural and engineering firm in Hamden and New London, and we do specialize in municipal programming, planning, design, feasibility studies. I've been with the firm for about 8 years doing a lot of these. So it's been a pleasure to work on these, and DPW is incredibly helpful with all of these. You can see here, we visited all 17 of these buildings. The goal of this project was to analyze the current facilities for code compliance, accessibility, and ongoing and future maintenance needs, and to help the town come up with a capital needs improvement plan for 10 years. And just to explain a little bit about what was included, really what we include is American Disabilities Act, health and life safety issues, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection analysis, along with ongoing and long-term maintenance issues. What's not included is any civil and site engineering, any structural analysis, anything in concealed spaces, hazardous materials, furniture, fixtures, or equipment, and any programming or renovations that may come up. And this isn't schematic design either. This is all kind of conceptual evaluations. And we also didn't update any floor plans here. To explain the process, a team of engineers and architects, we obtained floor plans and documents through DPW, and then we met with someone on staff, walked the buildings, all different engineers, fire protection, plumbing, mechanical, and electrical, along with architects. And we do a visual observation. You can see in some of these pictures, we have to measure certain things. Otherwise, we're documenting the information that we see and looking for some of these issues throughout the buildings. We continue to then organize that data into sections per building. We come up with narratives to really describe all the components that we're seeing and provide photos so that anyone can kind of follow along. But the bulk of it, the part that everyone seems to care about, are the spreadsheets, these cost matrices. This is where we create line items that show the assessment that we're noting. We also list a system or a code reference where applicable. We provide a ranking for these items, and then we give you the corrective action along with an estimate. And this is all compiled into that almost 400-page report that has been shared with you. The cost estimating, just so you know, the same team that surveys these buildings, we provide estimates for these issues. We have the best knowledge of what we see out there, and therefore can provide the best estimate based on that. These estimates are based on our opinion of probable construction costs. They're very conceptual. We don't have a design yet, so we're kind of thinking, what could this be? What do we see here? How big is this? And then we look at, we use our experience, similar scope, recent bids, trade values, and when we don't know, we resort to RS Means, which is an estimating book. And therefore, we define these hard construction costs for you. Another important component is the prioritization of these. You'll see that we have a 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1 is an urgent priority. We really save that for any code, health, and life safety issues that we know, where those should be addressed sooner than later. 2 is a high priority. These should be addressed within 1 to 3 years. 3 is a moderate priority, 3 to 5 years, and then 4 is a low priority. It doesn't necessarily even have to be done. Sometimes they're recommendations, but they should be done within 5 to 10 years. I'm going to take you through 2 examples. You know, instead of going through all 17 of the buildings, we thought we'd just run through 2 of them, and 2 that you're probably all very familiar with. The Fairfield Public Library, originally built in 1876 and had many additions over time. It's approximately 50,000 square feet. You can see it here. I'm going to take you through our spreadsheets. This is exterior. So we evaluate the exterior, we walk the building, we go up on the roof. The roof is one of the bigger items that we notice will need replacement in the next few years. It's a modified bit roof with ballasted that's kind of coming exposed, and you can see the alligator cracking. This older masonry building will need masonry repairs over time. Here you can see a dormer that is wearing. Some of the wood there is deteriorating and would need to be replaced, repaired. Interior conditions, really the library is extremely well kept. We didn't find a lot of items, just certain materials that, cracked floor. There's an area where water damage perhaps could be going on. We did note a stair that's not code compliant. That is something your building official would work with you. I don't know that they'll make you tear it out and rebuild it, but that's something we do note. Otherwise, there's a few minor ADA issues throughout the space. So some plumbing issues that we have, it's very limited. There's some corrosion on piping, handicap sinks in the kitchen. Mechanical, we have some pumps and fitting wearing and humidity control lacking, but you can see a lot of it's fours, so there's nothing crazy alarming here. Electrical, we have some exit signs and exterior lighting. That's a code thing that we've brought up. Additional fire alarms that should be included. Emergency light fixtures, things of that nature. Old Town Hall, your oldest building, built in 1974, and then I believe again in 1870. With the renovations, I knew 1936. I'm sure there were additional ones, and it's about 16,000 square feet. Here we have really your exterior is well kept. It's been painted. It's small cosmetic issues. We saw some vegetation growing up in one area that should, be removed. Maintaining your windows. We did not flag the doors and the hardware because we understand this is a historic building and some of those things are overlooked. But the roof will be nearing in the next few years around 2028. Interior, again, we noted some materials, carpeting, some plaster that needs some work, and then there are some ADA issues throughout here. Restrooms that need to be renovated. Here's an example of a knee space, not at a kitchen sink. And then although we aren't really evaluating structural, we did see that there's a lot of temporary shoring going on in the basement. So we did hold a line item allowance for that there. Some plumbing issues. Again, there's really limited plumbing, and they always do recommend to sprinkler the building, so that's included in here. Mechanical, we have some boiler vents, some flex pipe. There's a lack of ventilation in the basement, wearing on pumps, nothing too alarming. And electrical, again, some electrical panels and pull station locations and exterior lighting that should be replaced. Okay. So that kind of gives you a flavor of what the buildings take you through. In the end, we kind of break it down into a summary here so you can see kind of where these buildings fall. We created each column for each trade, the exterior of the building, the interior, and all of the MEP systems. We then kind of total that each building, and you start to see that all these buildings do total up to 22.6 million. We do then take the square footage and just kind of look at that at a cost per square foot, so we can kind of start to see where these buildings do fall. Certain ones stand out with a higher price tag per square foot, where others have a much lower value. Then we want to start to look at these as the priorities. What do you need to do right away? How much money, are the priority ones totaling up to? About 2.3 million. And then you'll see, again, the twos begin to grow at 8.8 million. Threes at just over 5 million, and then your fours at 6.3, totaling at that. The next important piece is the 10-year capital plan. As I had mentioned before, those are the hard construction numbers. As you compile these into projects, some of these are going to need design, testing, other components, and as you spread this out over time, you're also going to have escalation. So we started to kind of map out over 10 years what this could look like. The first year, if you address all the ones and then provide a 30% soft cost on top of that, it gives you a $3 million price tag. The next 3 years, we divided all the twos up, and then the escalation, we used a 3% per year here, and then also added the 30% each year onto those. And that is a broad number to account for all the different components that go into bidding projects. I know some of these may be done in-house, some may not be. So 30% we felt was a good planning number at this point. So this is just a way to break it out, you know, doing the 3s, the 5-year and 6-year, and then the following 4s in the rest of your years. So that is a summary of our 400-page report. There's a lot more detail in there, and we're happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Miller. And can you maybe just take the presentation down so we can see everything?
Absolutely.
And,
Yep. Stop sharing. There we go.
all right, terrific. Okay, questions from the board? Ms. Marman. You're muted, Sheila.
Okay, thanks so much for this presentation. This is more for the administration. Just in terms of these projects, can you tell us how they align on the waterfall, if at all? I mean, I know some of this is new information, but is there a percentage of these that are on the waterfall already? How can we kind of look at this, or is it too premature right now to put them on the waterfall?
I guess I don't know what you mean by waterfall exactly.
This is a question for the administration.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I can take this.
Thank you.
This is Jared. So in the needs assessment that we did, the capital needs assessment, we included funding for this based on the draft report that was done prior to this. There's been a little bit more work done with regard to a couple of additional buildings that have been included since then. And so it has been factored into that. We're going to continue to modify, and the first select woman has committed to working with the Board of Ed and others to put together a more precise capital plan and to do a continued workshop to modify that. In addition, what I would say is that there are a couple things on here that are sort of separate issues. You'll notice that Penfield Pavilion is in here. That's obviously not going to be, it wouldn't be included as part of this overall package, and would be a separate thing that would be done. There are a couple other ones that are mentioned in here, some of which are already in progress, including the firehouse, some of the repairs and improvements at the firehouse, which have already been authorized and are in progress now. There are senior center improvements that are also contemplated in here. So we will, we're going to take a closer look at this and, take out some of those things that are already being done, or being done as separate projects, and to come up with a more precise plan about how this would be funded.
So I guess, I know this is new, some of it's new information. So I guess what would really be helpful is to see what currently is on the waterfall, where it might fall, because we've now got these priorities, 1, 2, 3, 4, et cetera, in terms of years. So what's the timing in terms of getting a better sense of where these fall and incorporating them into the waterfall?
So Sheila, as I said before, we're going to put together a capital workshop with a member from the Board of Finance, somebody from the Education Administration, my administration, and go through all of the items that we have and put together a 5-year plan that all town bodies can sort of vote for a sense of the body, but we're not there yet. So we're still going to have to do that work to get there.
Thank you. Just my other question, because I know you've mentioned this working group before. In the past, we've had a town facilities commission kind of look at town projects and help. It almost is a small working group. It existed when I was on the RTM. They came before us. I know when Mr. Bremer was formerly, a part of the administration, he was involved in that. Is that what you're referring to, Ms. Kupchik, or where has the town facilities commission gone? It's part of our town code, but is it just kind of disappeared, or are you trying to reenact it through this small working group?
Well, my understanding that it's been defunct for some time. And so obviously I'm familiar too, Sheila. I was on the RTM probably around the same time you were. But it hasn't been active in a very long time. So I thought we're just trying to sort of do things a little bit differently, kind of modernize our process. And I don't think this is something that we can't do. We have engineers on staff, we have a DPW director, we have this report, we have a lot of information, and we have a list of many projects that need to be done in town. And so I thought, just a working group to get a 5-year capital plan that makes sense. And also to have, our bonding people look at it, update us on projections as we move forward, so that when we're going through the list, to make sure that whatever we put on there isn't, blowing through a cap of sorts, that we're not putting ourselves in jeopardy in any way. So there's a lot of different things to take into consideration. And again, the Facilities Commission, as I remember it when I was on the RTM so many years ago, they would do this work, but they would just then hand over stuff to the administration to then make the decision about what would go forward. In this way, when we started putting together the capital workshop this year, or the second year, Jared did some research and he looked. Other towns actually have 5-year plans, not just go to like we have done in the past before I got here, but they actually have 5-year sort of, they're not concrete. Obviously, there are things that happen and come up, but a 5-year plan, the town bodies actually, sense of the body, say, yes, we agree. These are our top level projects. They fall within our caps. We're not blowing through spending our credit card, and we are prioritizing projects. So I think this might be a more productive and efficient way to do it.
And it may be, what would be really helpful is if you put in writing, define what this small working body is going to be, sort of in terms of its objectives, its mission, or its makeup, just so we can get a better sense of how it will work. I think that would be really helpful.
No, it's not that hard to put in writing. It's just basically what I said, having the people who I said, someone from the Board of Finance, someone from the Education, my administration, engineering, DPW, have bond counsel review what we're doing, making sure we're staying within the parameters, and then present plans to the town bodies, a 5-year plan.
Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Moran. Mr. Curley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of things. First off, thank you for the presentation, Ms. Miller. I think that was really a helpful run through at a fairly high level, but obviously the report was incredibly detailed. So kudos to Silver Petroselli in the work that you've done. Couple of quick questions. on what I think is your last page on the presentation, you showed the potential 10-year spend with the escalation factors. It's just missing a total. I'm curious if you happen to have that number, as with the inflation and the soft costs included, spread over time, how that would compare to the what I think was 22 million in what 22.6 million, which would be, I assume would be in today's dollars.
I don't have it right this minute, but I can do it on the side as we're talking.
Okay.
I have the chart open, so
That's
it's
fine. I
fairly
appreciate that.
fairly
And then,
easy.
and while you're looking at that, I'll ask another more general question. When you talked about prioritizing the 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s, as I flipped through some of these slides that you prepared, I noticed that, for example, in the mechanical systems for the library, one of the boilers is at the end of its useful life, which perhaps now it's continuing to work, but if something's at the end of its useful life, we can't expect it to work much longer. But yet it's prioritized as a 4, which would put it 7 years out before it would be addressed at the earliest. So I wondered, I just wanted you to talk a little bit about that and why it might not be a higher priority.
Yeah, I think our mechanical engineer evaluated that and felt it would fall in that time frame, that you still have probably 5 years left on it, or 5 to 10,
Okay. So perhaps that's a testament to Mr. Ryan, who I've worked with in the past, and the comments that Ms. Kupchik mentioned earlier, and what a fine job James Ryan does, because if a boiler is at the end of its useful life and is expected to last another 7 years, that's a good that's a good combo.
Yeah, I could add to that a little bit, Craig. It's one of 2 boilers. It's a redundant system, and there's a lead lag, and they switch on and off. So it's not running all on its own all the time. So that might help a little bit.
Okay. And then obviously we'd want your buy-in too, James, in terms of whether you think that will hold out and would be okay to prioritize a little bit lower on the list.
Yeah, I agree. I agree at a 4. Yeah, there's the ones add up and should be first for sure. And there's a lot more that's more important, to be honest. Yeah. I'm an HVAC guy. I like to replace all the boilers in the rooftop units first, but that I have to. I don't mind following this plan. It's a good plan.
Okay, that's fine. And then one more comment, Madam Chair, with respect to the Town Facilities Commission. I know that commission has not been active for a bit of time, but I have worked with the Town Facilities Commission in years past, and I think a lot of what the first select woman described as this group that's going to come together. It sounds a lot like what the Town Facilities Commission used to do. Right. Now, I understand that the Town Facilities Commission didn't have a representative from the Board of Finance, and it didn't have someone from DPW. So that, in that extent, it's different. But I do know that many of the TFC members had an engineering background and architectural backgrounds, and backgrounds that were consistent with what a group would want to be made up of in order to help manage the town facilities. So it seems from this list that there's a lot of deferred maintenance and a bit of catch up that needs to occur. And look, we've got a town hall that's over 100 years old, so it makes sense that things are going to have to be replaced. So I applaud the effort to put this together. But I guess I just offer that I think reinstating the TFC might be a pretty good idea, especially with 17 buildings on our list here. So that's it.
I'll answer your question. It's 33,092,673.
Can you repeat that number?
Sure. 33,092,673.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris DeWitt. First off, I want to add my praise for James Ryan and his team, especially projects I've been involved with. His team's been amazing, and they're amazing every day. So I can't say enough about him and his team. So I was going where Mr. Curley was going to go too, right? 22. That number on slide 17 of 22 million. That number holds water before you add in soft costs, and if we did it this year, right? So and Ms. Miller's shaking her head, which is of course impossible, right? And even the 10-year plan at 33 million is limited because of what you did and how you did it, right? I mean, that was your scope of work, and I'm not minimizing what you did. But I have to say, I was really surprised to see that Old Town Hall was only 1.5 million, because I've personally seen the mushrooms in the floor, some of the other, the ADA stuff, which might be minimized because of a historic building like that. But I think I want to caution and ask Silver Petroselli team to maybe comment. When you do real, no kidding, structural analysis, I feel like this 33 number with all these buildings is somewhere in like the $50 million range. I mean, I really do, because I can't imagine that, again, conservatively, I just can't imagine Town Hall only being 1.5 million. I just can't. So, and I look at some of these other things, conservatively, that's for budgeting purposes. I think that's the range we're really talking about.
Yes, Old Town Hall, I was surprised it was only 1.4 myself. I'm sure there are more things we could probably pick up on. We hit the main things that kind of stand out. But yes, if you're going to start doing renovations and touch everything, it's going to be a lot more. Yes, I agree.
But overall, I listen, I'm an engineer. I love the report. It's the detailed report is really really done well, and I appreciate the data as an elected official as well. So, and I'll say one other thing to Mr. Curley's point. When I first got on the board, the TFC, Town Facilities Committee, did exist. That was what 14, 15 years ago. I think it's probably been defunct. Ms. First Selectwoman, for probably 10 years ish. But when the group of people that we had near the end there, I thought were amazing, and they had a lot of interesting disciplines. So that might be the route to go through at the next level for next time. So and I'm certainly supportive of your 5-year plan for the first Selectwoman's 5-year plan. So thank you.
Madam Chairwoman, if I could just jump in there for a minute. Chris, no, I appreciate that. And I agree. There were some very qualified people. But I think, with our engineering department and our DPW people, I feel like, listen, I think it's very valuable that they were offered their time and attention to it. But I think we can streamline this a little bit and get it done in-house, because I think we have qualified people. We have engineering, and we just had this report done by Silver Petroselli, which, would have probably taken the Town Facilities Commission a really long time to put together. And we have this now, and I think it's a valuable document for all of us.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I remember the TFC being frustrated because they were kind of constrained because they were a committee, But yeah, I think you're right. I think we have a much more robust engineering department and a much more robust DPW than we did 10-ish years ago. So I don't disagree with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Other questions from the board? Mr. Curley, did you have your hand up before?
Yeah, I was just going to clarify. And I know that the TFC had issued a report in 2014, and I think they were in existence at least through 2015 and 16. So it hasn't been quite that long. But I always saw that the TFC's role with respect to the town facilities was much akin to a building committee, and they would I agree, they could have never pulled together this comprehensive report that Silver Petroselli was able to provide, and this is fantastic. It really is a roadmap, but I think that the committee, the TFC, would just provide the oversight and help facilitate the execution of this plan without bogging down the town employees. They pull them in just like any building committee would, but there's no cost to the TFC either. So just wanted to clarify the timeline. That's all.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Walsh.
Yeah, and I will agree with Mr. Curley about this timeline. The TFC was in existence, it didn't go out of business like 10 years ago. He's right about 2014, 2015. And basically, what happened was the Tetro administration kind of sidelined them. They stopped using them for stuff. I've talked to people who are on the TFC. They just didn't want to hear from them. They had wanted to go in their own direction, and that's exactly what they did. They were sidelined. So let's not, sugarcoat this. That's what happened to the TFC, and they did have very qualified people. And between 2000 and up to 2014 or 15, they did great work. There were some great people on there, but other projects started coming along and they just weren't included in them. And maybe if they did, certain things might not have happened. They weren't really included in building Penfield for the first time. Guess what? All the footings were improper. They weren't involved with the second building of Penfield Pavilion number 2, and a couple of years later. And guess what? We don't get FEMA reimbursement. No one follows what they're supposed to be following. So yes, they should have been involved in it. And that expertise was needed by this town. And we sidelined it. We put them on the sideline, told them we didn't want to use them anymore. Mr. Curley, did anybody ever suggest you go to when you were doing the building on with Smith Richardson? Did anybody suggest that they come and look at it and work with you?
Yes, in fact, that's my experience with them. In 2014, the Town Facilities Commission was engaged to provide an assessment of the existing clubhouse and whether it had reached or exceeded its useful life. And they provided a comprehensive report and recommendation to the Board of Selectmen. And I believe that was instrumental in getting the clubhouse project started. And then once the building committee was formed, I was fortunate enough as chair of that committee to have 3 members of the Town Facilities Commission on that building committee. So I had a lot of expertise that I had available to benefit from, and it bared fruit.
Yeah. My recollection always seemed to be is that the TFC was there to be the oversight of the building committees.
That's right.
Building committees would have representatives from the school who had really no expertise sometimes in anything to do with building whatsoever.
Yep.
And they were supposed to look over the plans, meet with the chair, work with them to make sure that they were an oversight body for the building committees. And somehow that was sidelined. So it's unfortunate. It might be nice to have one back because we had some great expertise on there. All right, going back to, well, before I forget, I want to follow up on Miss Marmion's. No, I guess I did handle that one. So that was she asked some very valuable questions about the TFC. Ms. Miller, thank you for being here and thank you for your report. Can you give us some sense of, you give us numbers on cost estimates and stuff. Have you or your firm compared like an analysis like you did to what projects eventually come to cost? Are they pretty close? Are you within like 2% or 5% or 7%? I mean, have you checked yourselves on these numbers like with other communities you've worked with?
Yeah, we check these numbers with recent bids on similar projects. So yes, we believe they're good numbers. They're within means. Right now, there is an increase in construction costs. So I will say some of these numbers are from the summer, and we know, like, for instance, roofs have skyrocketed. So there's components like that we didn't necessarily account for at the time, but otherwise, we believe our numbers are good.
Okay, because we had conversations about Old Town Hall, and I appreciate Mr. DeWitt bringing up that point, because I wanted to bring it up as well, costing $1.468 million. We can do that for 1.468. I say bring it up on the next, bring it to the Board of Selectmen next month, if that's what it's going to cost. Because all I keep hearing about that building, it needs to come down. It's too expensive. It's going to cost all these millions of dollars to repair. So it's better just to take it out. So, but if we can house the people there and modernize that building, bring it up to code and new air conditioning and new everything, not everything, but a lot of things, and cure everything that needs to be cured in that building, even if it looked the exact same, I'm in for $1.468 million. And I'm in for it like soon. Let's just do it. Move on.
Again, that list is just those line items, though. It's not a full renovation of everything. I'm not saying painting these walls, ripping up this flooring. It's not listing everything.
How much more do you think it would be?
I would probably throw around $250 a square foot. Let me see what square footage is. Let's see.
Ms.
It's
Miller,
so hard.
Can you just outline in the report, because obviously I've read it, but it was minor things. Can you just read the list of things that
Can you just answer my question first?
For the 1.4?
Okay. Sure. I would say it would be a full renovation, could be 4 million, could be more. I mean, it depends on if you're knocking walls down. There's so many variables, things we don't know about that, but I just took $250. That's light renovation costs we would use for a building. And that's pretty light. And that's 4 million.
Okay.
And this is Bill Silver. Our report is truly to analyze the buildings on how they're currently used. We don't go into programming or try to understand of how they could be used, how they could be reprogrammed, walls moved, structure redone. That's a heady task that would involve all the departments. They really look at what your current needs are, and that's why the 1.5 million maintains the building, keeps it in good operational condition. Sure, the floors will still creak, and you'll still have uneven levels, but there's nothing functionally wrong with it. So it depends on how far you'd like to go in modernizing the building to get to your question.
Okay. I guess that's part of the problem, I guess, when we're thinking about your numbers, because we're seeing 1.468 and thinking that would pretty much do it. And I guess it would. The floors might creak, but it's part of the beauty of the building, of a historic building like that. I guess you guys would say architecturally, that's just one of the beautiful things about having a historic building like that. 5 focal points in the town of Fairfield. So 1.468 though would get it all the systems up to date. It would kind of be able to allow us to use the building the way it's currently being used and go forth with all new systems, correct?
Yes, all the systems that we've outlined here. I don't believe it's all new systems, but it's certain components at least.
Like the air conditioning, right? The HVAC is going to be new. It's not going to be a used air HVAC.
Yes,
right?
Air handling unit, cooling tower, ventilation, temperature controls, boiler and chiller loop. I'm reading some of these items. Basement dehumidifier. So, it's a good bulk of it. I just wouldn't say it's everything.
Okay, but you did put some money in there for structural stuff that you knew about at the time?
Yes, there's an allowance for $200,000 to address the structural issues. in the basement.
Not a lot.
In regard to the other building, your presentation regarding the library, and some of the things that you found that were deficient in that building, some things like floor cracking, you pointed out some water damage. Do you know if that water damage was caused by the flood that they had in the last 2 years?
I don't believe so because it was on the second floor, that one.
Okay. That's just new water
Um,
damage. Okay. And now the stair is out of code compliance, right?
Yes.
Okay. Kind of on notice now, as a town, that we have stairs are out of code compliance. That we can, now that we're all on notice of that, we can be sued on if someone were to fall down the stairs, right?
I will say it's a basement stair, mostly only used by, I think, employees and everything. So it's not like a main stair or anything, just so you know.
That'd be good because that's only workers' comp, I guess, that we have insurance for. And then some of it seemed to be cosmetic, as you pointed out, like that dormer.
Yes, but that could affect the integrity of the building, inside that area in the end. That's why we pointed out.
The code compliance issue with the stairs, is that a new code, or was that code in existence when the library was like rehabilitated?
That stair probably
rehabilitations, since then. So
yeah, that stair probably predates any of the newer codes that.
Okay, so it might be grandfathered in.
It could be.
And Bill Silver, just a comment. Building codes and fire codes are two distinct elements. Fire codes are retroactive. Fire codes are up to your fire marshal to enforce or even not enforce. That is where the citation comes from. The building official generally does not have the right to enforce new codes retroactively. So if the stairs were a building code issue and not a fire code issue, that stair can continue to exist legally and therefore obviously not become a focus of, let's say, a claim or a lawsuit. There are a lot of vagaries that go with even stairs, run and rise, handrail heights, handrail dimensions, clearance, grips. It's complex.
So, Mr. Silver, are you saying that if we do rehab some of the building, we don't have to update that code compliance then on those stairs? Is that what you're saying?
The code dictates at what percentage of the building's value that you are putting into rehabilitation that would then prompt a total code overhaul. And usually, I think that's 50% of the building's value. It takes a lot to reach that threshold. If you were to consider renovations, not unless you're doing virtually moving everyone out and totally overhauling a building. It takes a lot to reach that threshold.
Kind of did that 20 years ago, so that's why I'm concerned it wasn't picked up at that point in time, because we kind of spent that kind of money to do it, well over 50% of the value. So that's why I'm asking the question. So why wasn't it picked up at that point in time and dealt with? Okay, and this Old Town Hall are the vegetation issue you're talking about in Old Town Hall? Are these mushrooms that we keep hearing about?
No, this was some kind of vines growing up the side. I'm not aware of the mushrooms.
We've been hearing about mushrooms growing in the building for about a year, so it's going to offer some fungicide.
I didn't notice any.
All right. Okay, that's all I have, Miss Madam Chairwoman.
All right, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board? Mr. Mottola. John, you're muted. All right, John, we can't hear anything. Sorry. Okay, I'm not sure what the hand gestures mean, but maybe.
I think that's John's signal to move on.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'm all right. Here, can you hear me now? I'm
There
sorry.
he is.
You are.
Hey.
All right. Go ahead,
Pushed the
John.
wrong button. Sorry about that. I've only been doing this for 2 years. I think I'd figure it out already. Thank you. A couple of things. Thank you for this presentation. I think it's excellent. A couple of things, just, I don't want to take up too much time. I do think, Brenda, you should just keep in mind that TFC as you're thinking about this process. I know you're thinking about going in a different direction, but I think it's worthwhile just to consider it. I'm just throwing that out there. I think it could be very helpful. And Jared, if I understood your answer to a question at the beginning of this discussion, a lot of these items are in the waterfall, but you are still going to have to do some updates and adding some things. Is that a fair statement?
So the draft plan that came out early on, that was all in there.
Okay.
By the numbers that were laid out at the time. But yeah, there have been some updates to it that we need to include in there, and also to look at some of those things that we're doing separately, because ideally we would come to you with a package of these things as a proposal to be authorized. But those separate things would be done separately.
Okay. And then this may be an unfair question. We're going to ask it anyway. It's probably more to the administration. I mean, I hope we never renovate the old town hall to the extent that when I walk in that building, the floors don't creak. That's why it's such a great building. One of the charms of that particular building. But has there been any thought, Brenda, or anybody from the administration, to doing something like really radical inside the building? And I'm talking about tearing down walls and moving offices. Has that been a consideration or not? Or we're just not there yet?
Well, John, like anybody else, I have thoughts and ideas.
Yeah.
And, just to answer some of this, and James Ryan could probably expand upon it. The structural integrity of that building is an issue. And
okay.
It's a real issue. I mean, it's a dirt floor. It's got old beams holding it up. If you walk in the front door, the doors are literally sinking. It's actually something that James brought to my attention when I first came in here, just to tell me that, that building is a problem. And he's having trouble doing even minor repairs to it because of the age, right? And the windows don't open. So the people who work in those buildings, a lot of them can't even open their windows because of the age and the sinking and all the problems with the building. So when James shared that with me, and then, this prompted me to do this, to bring this forward, to get this assessment of our buildings, just so we could have a clearer picture of what's going on with our buildings. But sure, I have an idea or two. I would love to bring all our town services to Independence Hall, which is obviously a newer building. And if we had the money, I'd love to add on to the end of the building and bring all of the services that we have currently over there here. Because I can't tell you how many times I pull into this parking lot in the morning and people are going, "Oh, where's the town clerk? Is it here?" They don't know, because typically all your town services are in one building. In addition to that, the building is just really antiquated. It's just not a great building. And so if we were to, if we had the money to do that, to put an addition on, and then we talked a bit about this over the last couple of years about being able to apply for historical grants through the state, because apparently there's a lot of money up at the state for those kinds of renovations for old buildings. And I think it would be a beautiful building. Obviously, we're gonna never knock that building down. It's part of our history. We would want to maintain it and take care of it, but it could be a meeting hall for different meetings. It could be an RTM meeting hall. It could be a meeting hall for just even economic development events or whatever it is, right? Because actually, when you go in it, right, it's, aside from the horrifying nature of the building, you go into the tax collector's office or you go into the tax assessor's office. It's beautiful. I mean, the windows and the architecture, it's really a beautiful building. It's just in really poor shape. really poor shape. And frankly, it's not a great municipal services building, in my opinion. So those are some thoughts. Listen, we'll throw those things around over the years. I did put it in that capital workshop for all of you just to kind of know that I was thinking about it. But listen, I don't, there's so many needs. Who knows, where we're going to go.
Okay. Thanks for answering that.
Sure,
I'm all
of course.
set. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Mottola. Any other questions from the board? Okay, I just have a question, and I don't know if it's for the first selectwoman or maybe for Jared. When we first heard about some of the items in this plan during the capital workshop, and a question was raised as to whether these items would qualify for bonding. Did we have a bunch of small repairs and maintenance type items that were being bundled together into larger projects? And so that was the concern and part of the reason that prompted us to ask for, a presentation of the report. So now that this is done, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that question again, in terms of whether these projects, because some of the dollar amounts are pretty small, and within some of the larger projects, there's, looks like many small repairs in some of them. So I guess my question is, have you looked at that in terms of the financing and whether these are things we should bond, or are there any pieces within there that came to your attention as repairs that we might do through the operating budget over the time? Maybe just give us some sense of that.
So again, we only recently got this report, and there's obviously a lot going on here every day, but I thought this would be an ideal discussion to have for our working group, to have this discussion, because I think as we kind of plug in projects into this 5-year capital plan, almost like a Jenga, right? You put this, you put this, you put this, and then you talk to bonding, and then yes, there could be a list of non-reoccurring items that come out of it. But I was hoping that when we do this working group, we're looking at our massive list of projects, and we're looking at this document and all of these things, and we have to make some decisions. And I think it's valuable to have Board of Finance, to have the Education Administration, or even somebody from the Board of Education to be here talking about these items with me and plugging these things in, and then deciding for ourselves, okay, yeah, that's a small item. Can we take care of, James can say, yeah, you can take care of, based on this report, you can take care of this building ADA issue or fire safety issue for whatever, a couple $100,000. Yeah, we would say then, yeah, well, let's think about putting that over here on our non-reoccurring list. And so those are decisions I'd like to work on with this working group, because I think there's buy-in, everyone's there, and then go back to our respective boards. There's an RTM member there. There's a Board of Finance member there. We check in with bond counsel as we're moving along. We say, hey, what do you think of this list? What do you think about it? And then they give us feedback. So that's what I've envisioned us doing, if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, I think basically it's the answer is it's to be determined. Some of these, in fact, may be maintenance items that get treated in the operating budget for now. Other than the updates that Mr. Schmidt made reference to, they've all collectively been treated as bondable capital items for purposes of the waterfall, but that may change as the plans and the timing for these get refined, is what I'm hearing you saying. So thank you.
Yes, absolutely. And again, there are small items in there that we could, work on. Some of this stuff may be absorbed directly through our DPW budget, for some of these items. They take care of things all the time. It's when the thing gets big. It's when a boiler breaks down, or like at the police station, the thing just blows and it's not working. Then we have this, then we have to address it in a more serious way. But again, I think these are good discussions for the working group. And I think if we work hard at it, put our noses, proverbial noses to the grindstone, and get this work done, I think we'll produce a decent document for my administration, for the town boards, and for our community to have, the ability to see this is kind of where we're going, barring any accidents or things that have to be addressed immediately. This is where we're going to go for the next 5 years.
Okay. And I guess my only other question, we talked about this, or you made reference to this working group, and obviously this is only the town buildings, and, we have the same, we'd have to look at this in the context of the schools as well. And I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I know I see Jeff Peterson here, or I see a few names. I see Mr. Cummings here. I just don't recall when the last last equivalent analysis of this was done for the school buildings, and how that would fit into this process of looking at everything together. I don't know if anyone here can answer that. No? Okay. So, because to me, I mean, when we think about prioritizing and, we're looking at what we've done here, which is really prioritizing health and safety issues. I mean, I know that has been done to a degree. I mean, that's what's on the school waterfall plan, but whether it's been done at this level of depth, I'm not sure. And if it has been, I don't think we've seen it. So maybe we can sort of put that on the bucket list to just revisit that question. All right. Any last questions from the board on this item? Okay, I don't see anybody. All right. Well, thank you again. I'm sorry, John Matola, did you have a question? No? Okay. He's waving. I'm having to interpret his sign language there. All right. So thank you again to Silver Petrucelli and everyone that was here to present on this item. We really appreciate it. Seeing the thumbs up. All right. Thanks, everybody. Okay. With that, we're going to move on to item 4 on the agenda, which is to hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $508,445 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation." Can I have a motion to put this item before us? Mr. Matola, seconded by Mr. Testani. Okay, this motion is before us. There are 2 projects included in this first bond authorization: $150,000 for underwater bridge inspection and repairs, and $358,445 for self-contained breathing apparatus. The backup information for this agenda item begins on page 457. Members of the public, if you intend to offer a statement on either of these 2 projects, please go ahead and indicate so in the chat box to the meeting at this time, and you'll be recognized after these items are heard. For the first project, underwater bridge inspection and repairs, we have, let's see, do I see Mr.?
I'm here, Bill Hurley.
Mr. Hurley here. Okay, we have Town Engineering Manager Bill Hurley here to present it, and CFO Jared Schmidt is also here. Gentlemen, welcome. Thank you, Bill, for providing the 14-point summary for this project. I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, I'll just do for the interest of time, I'll just try to go quickly with the background and the purpose and a couple of the other highlights for this project. As you know, the town of Fairfield infrastructure is aging, and while the Department of Transportation typically inspects our larger bridges, it was unable to do so with this one within their typical scope. Only a screening was performed because a couple of the bridges and culverts are constantly underwater. This situation requires the inspectors' scuba diving capabilities to perform special inspections for the bridge and culverts that may need repair or replacement. Engineering has identified Old Field Road Bridge as a priority for bridge inspection. The bridge was built in 1935, has scour below the wing walls and footing, and as I said, the consultant would inspect the bridge for the condition for the substructure and the superstructure as well. They would make a list, a priority list for repairs in the short term, and then probably recommend replacement in the long term. We just don't know how long that is until they get a real good look at the bridge. See, any short-term repairs would extend the service life of the existing bridge before the eventual replacement. And we're trying to keep the bridge open to traffic while it's in the design process or repair process, if that was the case. As I mentioned before, the proposal includes a full superstructure and substructure inspection of the bridge. The prior preliminary screening, which was done in 2016, rated the bridge in fair to poor condition. The request for the bridge and culvert inspections is roughly $25,000, between $20,000 and $30,000. Short-term bridge and culvert repairs range from $30,000 to $120,000, and maybe more if they recommend the full replacement. Obviously, we'll have a better idea when the inspection and the report and recommendations are complete. Just a note later on for other considerations, access to the site is now easier because the town has acquired the adjacent property, next to the bridge. And as always, the engineering department in town will investigate any grant opportunities, such as the local bridge program, or LOTSIP, or Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act, the IIJA, the new one. So if we end up going with replacement for that. So I'm here to answer any questions that the board may have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hurley. Thank you for that summary. Questions from the board? Mr. Testani.
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. Hey, Bill, how are you?
Fine. How about yourself?
Good to see you.
Sure, Jim.
Just a quick question on the previous inspections. Obviously, it's in need of repair. I just, on my own curiosity's sake, why wasn't this addressed? I believe you said a few years ago. Do I have that right?
Yeah, because it was in fair to poor condition, and the ones that we've addressed recently were in worse shape. We try to go by condition,
Okay.
As best guessed as we can. If the screening had said we can't see anything, we have no idea, or if it was poor and you better replace it right away, we would have done that once the report came out. But it is now time to address this bridge, and that's why it's being presented this year.
And just one quick follow-up on that.
Sure.
Will this be done at the same time? And forgive me, I'm not going to get the name of the bridge correct, but it's that Mill Plain Road.
Oh, the duck farm run?
Yeah, I think that traffic, I believe, is going to be diverted, if I remember that conversation correctly.
That's correct, John. Just to let you know, right now, this is just going to be for the inspection of the bridge, and then
Gotcha.
any short-term repairs that are needed. We don't plan on closing the bridge for the inspection unless it's, perhaps for a day or two, if they need to do that. And even then, we might be able to even do alternating traffic.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it. Thanks, Madam Chair. That's it for now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Testani. Other questions from the board? Mr. Mottola.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. Can you just, my only question really is the other culverts that haven't been inspected by the town. Where are they located generally? If you can give me just an idea.
We've had, there's one on Verna Hill. There's, most of them are up in the Greenfield Hill area.
Okay.
I had a list of 4 or 5 of them, but it's somewhere on my desk, to be honest with you.
That's all right.
But I can email you that information if you want. And
okay. Yeah, if you can, but don't worry about it. So it's not just Oldfield Bridge, and it's going to include other culverts that are located throughout the town.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, we've had a good 2 dozen that have been inspected, and then we
Okay.
personally have inspected some as well. But there's just a couple others, you know, that need further investigation because they're you know, they're underwater all the time, or it might not be the safest situation for us to inspect on our own.
All right. And your cost estimate is, you have it at a 5, and you say it's based on current supply chain, unknown field conditions, and economic climate. Are you, just so I understand, are you taking into consideration that, and that's why you're at 150, or are you thinking 150 may not be enough based on?
Yeah, we really don't
these
know. That's
issues?
why usually I can give you like an 8 or a 9 out of 10, you know, a pretty good
Yeah.
feeling. But on this one, because we're kind of, you know, semi blindfolded with the bridge, we really don't know until the report. I just wanted to have
Okay.
some money available, obviously for the inspection, which is priority number one, and to have
Yep.
for some repairs, so that if they say, well, if you do this and this, we can have the bridge last another 3 to 5 years or something like that, then that would be enough time for us to go through the design and get the permits. And maybe
Okay.
if we're lucky, they'll say 10 years, you know?
All right, Bill. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mottola. Other questions from the board? All right, Ms. Leclerc.
Hi, everyone. This question is for, I guess, Mr. Hurley or Jarrett. How did we come to decide that we're going to bond this over 10 years? Will this inspection be something that we need to do every 10 years? The value of it will last 10 years? Or is there a rationale for it?
I think it was proposed at 10 years rather than the typical 20-year, because it does have a shorter lifespan. The inspection, the state, when they have the larger bridges, they inspect them every 2 years. Smaller bridges, they inspect, you know, every 10 or 20 years. And so when we get the inspection for this bridge, we'll go by, we'll sit down with the consultant, we'll go by the recommendations for it. And if they recommend replacement, perhaps maybe one more time in the span before we get the, you know, design plans and the permits in place, we'd have to inspect it again if it was in pretty, you know, poor shape. If it was in fair shape, we would go with that, and then maybe inspect it every, you know, 4 or 5 years. It really will depend on what the recommendations and what condition the bridge is in.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Leclerc. Any other questions from the board? Mr. Curley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a question for Jared. Just trying to reconcile tonight's ask versus where we were in our last meeting when we talked about these non-recurring capital items, and comparing notes to our previous meetings. I see that these were on there, so that's a good thing. But I do note that there were a few projects that were listed in our previous meeting that were not brought forward today. So I actually wanted to ask about those, whether we would expect to see those at some point in the future. They're just not ready to come tonight, or if they've been dropped off the list. And just wanted to get some insight on the kind of bigger picture.
Which projects are you referring to, Mr. Curley?
Just looking at the list from our last meeting, DPW sidewalk repair, 500,000, DPW senior center deck patio, 100,000, fire station rehab, 250, Camden Street properties demo, 642,000.
So some of those are ARPA projects?
Yeah.
And then other ones, the Camden Street property is one that will be, we expect to be funded. We're going for a grant on that. We have a grant application in, And then we have another source of funding for the remaining $40,000. So we actually don't expect there to be any cost to the town, provided that we get the grant. But we don't want to put it before you until we know what the fate of the grant is.
Okay. And then with respect to tonight's the fire request, the self-contained breathing apparatus, the full amount is $358. It looks like there's an expectation of some subsidized funding of about $242K, which would leave the town to cover about $116,000. Is that still the plan?
Yes.
And where would that 241 come from? Is that also ARPA, or would it be something else?
That's a different grant, and we Chief McCarthy is on the line. Chief,
Are we on the other matter?
Yeah, can we, Mr. Curley? Yeah, can we just make sure we're done with this first item, and then
Sure.
we'll get to the chief, and he can walk us through that one after.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. All right. Does anyone else have any questions for Mr. Hurley on this first item? Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Hurley. All right, so let's go ahead then and move on to the second project included in this bond resolution, and that's the, as we just discussed, the $358,445 for self-contained breathing apparatus. The backup information for this item is on page 461, and we have Chief Dennis McCarthy here to present it. Chief, welcome. Turn this over to you.
And Deputy Chief Karen Dunn is on the call as well. Let me just walk you through briefly the process in which we replace breathing apparatus. This is typically a project that is included in the fire department operating capital. We had the last time we replaced breathing apparatus, we replaced 28 units back in 2018, and at that time, just as there is this time, we applied for a FEMA grant. We got that grant. Local share at that time was $30,000. And we had every anticipation of continuing to go through that process. But here we are 4 years later, and the remaining 38 units in our inventory are 3 NFPA code cycles out of date, and there is an unacceptable disparity between the 2018 units and the current units. So and they're approaching end of life. So we applied for a FEMA grant. The FEMA grant will only cover $7,000 for each unit, and the Fairfield specification for breathing apparatus nets out at $9,200 and change per unit. So the numbers before you indicate a FEMA grant number of $241,000, a local share of approximately $25,000, and a local Fairfield effect upcharge of $2,400 per unit, adding another $92,000. Clearly, this is beyond the capacity and intent of the operating budget. So we have submitted the request as part of the capital budget. And we had, and just by way of clarification, we have applied previously last year to FEMA for this purpose and were denied. The deputy and others in the department have done a grant review, identified some technical flaws in our approach that did not score well with FEMA, and we've made those adjustments in this grant application and are hopeful that the grant can be approved. And also, we hope that the FEMA is viewing the allotment, the $7,000 cap is being reviewed by FEMA. So if the grant does get approved, there is also the potential that they will increase the allowable cost per unit and the local share. That added $92,000 of local upcharges will be covered as part of the grant. And with that, I will pause for questions.
All right, thank you, Chief. Questions from the board? Ms. Marmion.
Thanks very much. You answered some of my questions, so I was wondering why this was not in your operating budget, and now you explained why. Level of confidence that FEMA is going to give you the grant. I mean, I know it's always an unknown, but 50% more confident since they denied you in the past?
Let me ask Deputy Chief Dunn, who had the direct conversation with our FEMA liaison, to answer that question.
So, it's always difficult to say for sure, but we rewrote our grant application from the ground up. We had multiple input, including several conversations with the FEMA Region 1 rep, who was very, very helpful. We also ran this by the town's grants coordinator, Terry, and she was very, very helpful, giving us suggestions, rewriting some of our financial need documents. So we think that, it's very, the chance is going to be a lot better this time. Also, FEMA has sort of like rubrics. They have these programs that they do like to give money to, and there's other programs which they don't like to give money to, and we know that they wouldn't be successful. They don't like to give money for radios and electronics. They don't like to give money for fire engines, but they do love to give money for SCBAs because they're the lifeblood of all fire departments and a very expensive item. So we do think that it's a good combination. We're pretty, I don't know, I'd say 95% is what I'm thinking, but I hope I'm right. So.
Okay, well, that's pretty good.
Go ahead. Sorry. I would just add, Ms. Marmion, that we modeled our grant application against a successful neighboring community grant for the same purpose. And I think that leads to some of the confidence. I'm never that confident as the deputy chief, but I think that all things considered and the feedback that we got from FEMA, a successful model that was approved in another community does make me more than 50% sure that we'll get the grant.
Terrific. That's great. Just another question, if I may. What are you doing with you indicated that the old breathing apparatuses or apparati, I'm not sure.
Muted fourth declension.
Okay, that they're not, it's a little frightening. They're not working, efficiently or safely or whatever it is. Are those going away? Is this a total replacement you're looking for? How are you working it? Will you have enough with your ask to eliminate the others, or what is your plan?
So the breathing apparatus that gets retired, bottles will remain. Any air bottles that are within their service life used with the new air packs. The remaining units, the ones that are most appropriate and most current, will be used in the training division. We send air packs up to the fire academy when we have recruits attending the Connecticut Fire Academy, and at our own fire school, we use some of the surplus retired units for training. And the difference is they're in a controlled environment. This is not, training is intended to be a controlled environment, a lot of predictability. So we don't have the same hazards. Yes, they're operating in a dangerous atmosphere, but under controlled circumstances. So we feel that we can get service life out of them opposed to.
And what do you expect the life what's the life expectancy of one of these new apparatuses?
They're about 15 years, and that's what that's 3 NFPA cycles, pretty much.
Okay, so 15 years. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marmion. Mr. Walsh.
Evening, Chief and Deputy Chief.
Evening.
Just a couple of questions. I'm sorry. I did read your 14 points, and thank you very much. It was a little bit technically dense for me between rectus valves and Hansen valves and things like that. So, you know, if it's covered, please, I apologize in advance for not having the knowledge about what these things are. But the ones you want to replace, the ones that you want to replace, what's the lifetime? Are they 12 years old? Is that what it says?
They're over 12 years old, yes.
Those supposed to have a 15-year life?
Basically, it's 3. Usually, they don't want to support anything past 3 5 years. You know, 3 NFPA cycles, which are about 5 years each. But we're also finding now each year we have to test our SCBAs, and we found a lot of them failed and had to be rebuilt this year. So we're starting to see more and more breakdowns of these because they're on our backs every day. They're the things that you're going into buildings with, not just for fires, but for hazmat calls, for any carbon monoxide calls and things like that. So they get heavy use and they get banged around in the fire engines all the time.
Okay. And will these new units that are proposed be 100% compatible with the last 28?
Yes.
The 2008 versions?
Yes, because the 2008 incorporated that new buddy breathing, so there will be those same fittings that you're talking about, Hansen versus Rectus. They'll all be the Rectus fittings, which are the modern fittings. So, you know, and what that means is that suppose a firefighter becomes disoriented and out of air, and we send a rescue crew in, and that firefighter needs to be extricated from someplace. Well, the firefighters going in can take their own packs, and they can plug into this person and give this person air, or if a civilian is caught under machinery in a dangerous, hazardous atmosphere, we can go in with a big pack of air, and we can plug into the civilian and put one of our air packs on this person so that he or she can breathe. So, you know, that's one of the things. The face pieces from 2008 and up are they're able to withstand high heat. They were finding, UL did tests and found out that during flashovers, the previous masks would not stand up and they would melt. And so the people, you know, the firefighters would lose visibility, or, you know, their air would get contaminated with the, you know, the breathing air would get contaminated with the outside air. So things like that, where, you know, some of the things that were addressed in the 2008 standard, and so our other 28 units, which are currently in service, they will be compatible with these 38 that we're looking for now.
And just a point, 2018 standard, not 2008.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry, that's what I meant. 2018.
2018.
2018, yes.
Yeah, that was clear.
It's the last one. I'm sorry.
So if we weren't going to bond, I understand why we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
That would have come up in your capital request as part of your budget this year.
Yes, it would.
Yes.
Are we, when we get your budget, going to be seeing a lower capital request? Because if we bond this would have been something that would have been coming up. Are we going to be seeing a lower capital request?
No, there are a couple of big drivers in our capital request, and the most significant is a radio replacement request. While we anticipate the major capital radio replacement project, the townwide project that the fire and police have been working on for a number of years, we are not at a point as we wait for federal government funding to augment some of that expense. In the interim, both the police department and fire department will have to replace some portable radios, just because we can't wait for that radio project to supply that. So we do have that and vehicle replacement in this budget that will create a higher number.
But also, as you would ask, we were planning on putting this in our capital budget, but now we will not have it in the capital outlay.
And I just want to put a finer point on the comment that the deputy made is we do look at, and try to strategize what FEMA grant programs will be applicable to what capital purchases. It would be great if we were able to fund one of our fire trucks, but a community of our size, demographics, and budget, it's not looked at favorably. So these life safety issues that are supported by FEMA and the Fire Act grant are ones that we want to capitalize on.
Yes, I understand that, and I actually appreciate that. So to the extent that we can get FEMA to do the reimbursement or the increased amount, if that becomes possible this year, that would be a great thing. And the reason I was asking about whether that's going to change your capital thing, it's some of the areas I try to see like savings on. So for example, with the police, we're going to be paying for, with ARPA money, 10 years worth of their camera systems and other things. And we're going to be paying for a lease with ARPA money. So I would suggest that I would see a reduction in their budget for that same amount because we're using ARPA money to pay for 10 years worth of stuff. Interested in seeing that. So I'm just asking this around as we're going around. But I appreciate you telling me about the radios. Appreciate that. And thank you very much for the detailed explanation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board? Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a comment than question to both the engineering department and the fire department. Thank you for the 14 points. I brought up in an earlier meeting how important I think the 14 points are, and I would like the record to reflect in this meeting that I think the whole board is a very strong advocate of having 14 points for all of our major acquisitions like this, whether it's capital or not. And I think these are two good examples of really well done 14 points that answer a lot of questions, even though some may be technical in nature, even before we have a chance to deliberate. So I want to make sure the record reflected that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Certainly agree with you. Ms. LeClaire.
I just wanted to follow up on the 14 points. I did have a question with them because I thought the 14 points always addressed the useful life of the item that was being purchased, but I don't see that in either of the details provided. So I was wondering what happened to that question in the 14 points.
I don't see it as one of the ones in the template. Maybe it has to be put back in the template. There is number 12 is financing, but I think that's more something that town would deal with.
Right. I just recall that was always part of the 14 points, and I see it just seems to be missing from the template we're using. So I was wondering if someone could go back and look and see if that was somehow omitted, or if we could add that, because I think that for something that's being bonded, I think that's a very important question.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, can you go back and take a look at that? Or I see Mr. DeWitt has his hand up. Chris, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, actually, after the last meeting, when I talked about this, Mr. Hurley provided the template back from Richard White because he was the originator of the 14 points. And yeah, there is no useful life in the 14 points. There is a number 7 is additional use or demand, which I guess could be interpreted as useful life, but there's no specific. I mean, we can add it. We can make it 15 points, right? But right now, there's no. From the template we had back from Richard White, never had a useful life.
Okay, Jared, maybe you could take a look at that and see if one of the questions can be modified in the template. I appreciate Ms. Leclerc's point, and I think those questions always come up with regard to useful life, so probably putting that justification would be helpful.
Okay, we'll take a look at that and see if there's, put it with an appropriate question on there.
Thank you. Other questions from the board? Mr. Walsh.
And maybe this is for Mr. Schmidt, I'm not sure, but this board has normally tried to pair up the useful life of whatever we're purchasing with the bond. And in this case, this is falling under the 10-year bond, but it's a 15-year useful life. So I'm wondering why it was determined, I'm not sure who determined it, why it was determined we put this under 10 years versus the 15 years, and what the reasoning was.
So I would say that ideally it's going to last 15 years. Sometimes things don't last as long as we think they will. So to be on the conservative side, it was put in as a 10-year bond. So we went less than what we thought what the life would be.
Next question, I guess.
Okay. Mr. Walsh, do you have a follow-up on that?
No, I guess, I mean, I just wanted to know why. I guess he's being conservative, and I guess the last set of apparatus was supposed to last 15 and it's only going to last 12. So I guess that's, I guess makes sense. I just wanted to know what the answer was, because you normally, if someone tells us it's 15 years, we do a 15-year bond for it. That's been what historically we've done on this board.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think we certainly don't want to go longer. I think
No, never.
Going shorter is in being a little bit conservative if there's a question on the life is probably you know, not a bad thing. But I do think that, back to the earlier point, you know, having this laid out in the summaries going forward would be helpful, because that way someone's thinking through it as they're putting this together. The board has the question, or the board has the answer to this question. So we don't have to ask. Anyone else?
My follow-up, though, on that same thing was for Mr. Staffstrom, kind of on the same line, I guess. Mr. Staffstrom, I think I know the answer, but the reason we have to bond the 358, even though we think it's only going to cost us $116,000, correct? Because potentially we might not get certain awards and things like that. Is that the reasoning? You're muted.
That's correct, Mr. Walsh. Remember, your bond resolution is also an appropriation resolution, so you're appropriating that amount. And we have at the end of the resolution specific language that says if you get a grant, the grant will be used to reduce the appropriation in effect.
If we decided we didn't want to bond this and we wanted to purchase it, add it to the chief's operating budget, would we have to put the 358 in order to get the grant with FEMA? Or could we bond a lower amount than, give him cash in his budget that would be lower than the 358,000 bond? Because you know, we don't have to bond things. I mean, we've not traditionally bonded, from what I understand, these scuba units. The last time we bought 28, we bought them with cash.
If you weren't gonna bond this and you're gonna put it in the general fund budget, in effect, by putting it, then obviously you could just delete it from the bond resolution, and you could put it into the budget. You could put it into the budget at either the full amount or the amount that you expected net of the grant. What I heard is if you put it in net of the grant and you don't get the grant, then you can't buy the equipment. So I think that if you put it in for the full amount in the general fund budget and then got the grant, you obviously would have 200 some plus $100,000 of surplus funds.
It's just, I'm trying to think this through because, you can make this argument for everything.
Correct.
There might be a grant. So let's just start bonding the entire part of the capital budget of the entire town. I mean, if you stretch that argument out. So I'm just wondering whether it makes sense to start funding these things.
Yeah, I think we only really do this though when there's an expectation of some or all of a portion of something being subject to a grant. I mean, you wouldn't do that with other things that were never going to be the subject of a grant. So.
Okay. So I know that, and I just want it in the record, if Prue can put it in there, that to the extent that I vote on this, it's because of the expectation of a FEMA grant and it being pretty secure that we're going to at least get some part of it. In future years, if we are going to do apparatus like this, and there's not a definite expectation of us getting a grant from FEMA or somebody else, then I think it should be in the operating expense. But, I guess I'm saying I will support this time as part of this bonding because of the expectation that we will get this grant. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh and Mr. Staffstrom. Anyone else? Ms. Marmion.
Hi, just a follow-up. Given all we've heard from supply issues, et cetera, what's the expected timing of getting this equipment? And in addition, what's your expected timing for getting a response on the grant application?
We're not sure. They haven't told us exactly, but we think in the next couple of months we should know about the grant. That's normally what the cycle is. So, and then supply chains, we don't know. That would be months from now, I'm sure, that it would take them to deliver that many.
Okay. In the meantime, you have what you need. I mean, in terms of the current breathing apparatus systems.
Yes, we're using them. There's certain things undesirable about our older units, and they're more prone to, needing maintenance. But we're continuing to use them.
And is there a warranty for, I apologize if that was already asked. Is there a warranty for these that you had for the older ones, and because it sounds like they're not going for 15 years, and will there be a warranty with the new ones for those 3 units or 15 years, et cetera?
I don't remember for sure what the warranty is, but it's sort of a normal warranty, like maybe 1 year in parts and labor and things like that. It's nothing for a life of a unit.
I see. So, okay. And what about your maintenance costs for these units? Do you have an idea of what it costs you to maintain them? Or can you give us an estimate of what it's cost you?
Yes, we had, I don't have it in front of me, but I know it was in the thousands. We brought, the vendor in to go through all our units because it's required. And there were numerous units that needed to be repaired, and it went into the thousands. I'm trying to remember whether it was $6,000. I could give you the exact figures, but it was a lot of money and it was all with these older units that we had problems. There was one unit where, we wound up getting, we were told that the cost to repair it was going to be more than a new unit would cost. So we didn't have that one repaired, and we can't use that. So, the maintenance costs are definitely dramatic at this point with those older units.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marmion. Anyone else? Okay. We have no members of the public have asked to speak on this item. Just to finalize, are there any questions from the board on the bond resolution itself for Mr. Staffstrom? Okay, seeing none, we can we can bring this item to a vote. Can I have a motion to waive the reading of the bond resolution in item 4? Mr. Walsh, seconded by Mr. Curley. All in favor? Okay. It is unanimous. All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Chief. All right, so we'll bring this to a vote. All those in favor of adopting the bond resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $508,445 for the costs of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriations," please raise your hand. Okay, Ms. Marmion, Mr. Walsh, Mr. DeWitt, Mr. Curley, Mr. Testani, Mr. Mottola, Ms. Leclerc, Ms. Charlton. The motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
Ms. Charlton, did we waive the reading of the
Yes.
reading?
Yes, we did.
Okay. So why did we read it?
Pardon me?
Didn't you just read it again?
No, I just read the item I just took the vote.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 5. Non-recurring capital 20 years. To hear, consider, and adopt a bond resolution entitled "A Resolution Appropriating $3,717,899 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriation." Can I have a motion to put this before us? Mr. DeWitt, seconded by Mr. Walsh. Okay, this motion is before us. There are a number of projects included under this bond resolution, and they are summarized on page 467 of the backup materials. Members of the public, if you intend to offer a statement on any of these projects, please indicate so in the chat box, and you'll be recognized after the items are discussed. Okay, the first two projects for $500,000 and $453,200 respectively are for Pine Creek, Mccleary, and Riverside Creek tide gate repairs. The backup information for these projects begins on page 468, and I believe I'm looking for Tim Bishop. Mr. Bishop, are you here?
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Welcome, Mr. Bishop, and I'll turn this over to you.
Great, thank you, Madam Chair. Calling from the the automotive office right now, so hopefully I come in clear. So yes, as you can see, my 14 points are both similar in nature. Pine Creek, Mccleary tide gate, and the Riverside Creek tide gate, which incorporates Ash Creek. Both tide gates, similar to what we've heard from some of the other discussions tonight, are coming to the end of their life. They are still functional at the moment, but when I took the position, these were in the hopper, coming down the intentional pipe for replacement. They have value with obviously flood control with two of the major water course and watershed systems in town, as well as biological and ecological aspects with controlling the estuary system in both of those watersheds with the flux of saltwater and freshwater. Again, they're relatively self-explanatory, just due for replacement. And I'll take any questions that anyone has, and hopefully can answer them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop. Questions from the board? Mr. Testani.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Hey, Tim, how are you? Thanks for coming tonight and supplying the information.
Thank you.
I just had a quick question. Obviously we were talking about FEMA grants earlier with the fire department. So just curious whether it's FEMA or any other grant, has that been investigated for these? What's the prospect, again, whether it be FEMA or some other way for the town to get some reimbursement for these costs?
I don't have any information on any of those, any possible grants. I'm not sure how it's viewed in their eyes. Obviously, it is flood control. I'd be happy to look back at records and see if any type of grants were given on previous replacements, related to maintenance and lifetime. But yeah, I don't have any firm intentions at this time that was the case to pursue.
Okay, do you know if the administration or, we have people who investigate grant opportunities. So are you saying that that piece of it has yet to be determined whether these qualify for a grant or not? Or I just trying to clarify, obviously we'd want to try to get, if possible, some kind of, again, whether it be FEMA or some other organization to help defray the cost of this.
Hey, Mr. Testani, this is Jared. I think I can help out in answering that. We have our new grant coordinator who is reviewing all anything that's on the capital list, and that anything that comes up, and is looking for opportunities to grant opportunities so we can get reimbursement. And I can say that she, we didn't find anything that was appropriate for as an opportunity for these particular projects.
So when you say it, just so I understand, when you're saying it hasn't been clarified or anything appropriate, you're speaking you investigated FEMA reimbursements and other possible opportunities for the town to receive some kind of reimbursement. Did I understand that correctly? I just want to obviously
Yes.
exhaust all possibilities.
Yes, and it could have been for a number of reasons, that it didn't meet a threshold of a dollar amount. There just wasn't anything available. In this case, I don't know what the particular answer was or reason was, but I just want to let you guys know that we are. This is the capital plan is one of the main documents that our grant coordinator looks at when we're looking for opportunities for grants. And so she is well aware of what's on there and what's available. And we didn't find a grant that met the criteria for this project.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Testani. Mr. Walsh.
Jim Walsh, how are you? Thanks for being available mobily. In regards to these tidal gates, are they going to be manually operated, or are they like remotely operated, where you hit a button and they would open or close?
Currently, the Riverside Creek tide gate is a self-regulating tide gate, so that mechanism can be closed to prevent high tide pushing back into the marsh, ahead of a storm, as we've been doing in the past. The Mccleary tide gate currently is a flap gate, which is slightly different. It isn't self-regulating. It just swings, and actually is not swinging the way it should at the moment when I saw it last. I'm not sure in the design when we get to that point whether that would change, but I think the intent is to typically take as much of the manpower and man hours out of these and let them function themselves.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board? Okay, Ms. LeClaire.
Just a real quick one. It says in the 14 points that both of the tide gates, one was put in 1997 and one was put in 2001, I think. So they both exceeded the 20 years, and that we've been using them longer than their estimated life. So what is an estimated life of a tide gate? Like, how long should one last?
I think they're similar to the mechanical discussion we had earlier with Mr. Ryan, but I've been told 20 to 30 years. Obviously, that's site specific and condition specific. These currently the piping is corrugated metal, and we're dealing with brackish water. Much of the functioning gates themselves have aluminum and fiberglass components that obviously corrode over time and begin to fail. So it can vary, I guess, is my answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeClaire. Any other questions from the board? Okay, Mr. Bishop, I actually have a question. In the 14 points under reliability of cost estimate, it says here, the estimated costs are based on similarity to other completed projects. I anticipate the cost of materials and installation to be higher to account for inflation, increased material costs, and design/permitting expenses. I wasn't really sure what to make of those statements in relation to the reliability of the estimates here. Can you elaborate for us, please?
Sure. The estimates that I passed along had been existing on previous, a previous, I guess, waterfall list. I just put that in there just to be clear that they may be higher again based on materials and engineering specifications or engineering a determination of what exactly might be involved if the old gates are abandoned or removed and something else is determined to be a concern with say the integrity of the dike or something similar with the channel that obviously that's unforeseen and may increase the overall total of the cost of the project.
Okay, I appreciate that there can certainly be unanticipated costs that come up, but is there, maybe just help us understand a little bit better how the cost estimate was built. Do you have any contingency in there, or was that just sort of a sentence, kind of a just in case there's something we don't know, or?
Yeah, I don't think it would go from, the estimated 450 or 500 to 800. I wouldn't anticipate that just because it's similar. We're replacing a pipe with another pipe. It's the scope replacing in kind doesn't really change. On a similar project that's on the capital side that we're actually proposing to, or the engineers proposing to change the design from 3 gates to 5 at a different location. So comparatively, I don't see either of these projects changing location or increasing the number of pipes or anything like that. So they are just in kind, but is aluminum more expensive now than it was 3 years ago? Absolutely. Plastic more than corrugated metal? Maybe not. So yeah, it was just kind of a blanket statement saying maybe the number is accurate, but maybe it isn't by much. If that answers your question.
Sort of, I guess. Okay. Yeah, I hope what I'm taking away from your statement is that you're reasonably comfortable with your estimate. You know, anything could happen, but this is your best estimate right now, and everything that you're aware of has been included in the cost estimate.
That's correct.
Okay.
That includes the engineering, design, materials, installation, and permitting. There would be state and federal permits involved.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. Ms. Marmion, follow-up question?
It's not really a follow-up question.
Go ahead with whatever question you have.
Okay. Okay. I'm just wondering, in terms of the Flood Erosion Control Board, are they involved in looking at your recommendations for the replacement of the tide gates, et cetera? Because I know that this is under not their purview, but it's what they consult on. So were they kind of engaged in recommending that these items be replaced or repaired?
They weren't. I did have a talk with them briefly at the end of last year. Not necessarily on these specifically. More of the recommendation came from one, they were on the waterfall list prior, and from what I was told, the can has been kicked down the road for quite a while, but also based on the recommendation of the open space manager who operates and maintains and knows these gates better than anyone else in town.
Okay, I'm just curious, and it's something to, I'd like more information on, or moving forward in terms of that coordinated effort, because I know that they're doing a study right now. They've got funding for a study to look at issues down, especially in the beach area, and they also worked on Rooster River, but just to make sure that our efforts are coordinated, that things change, and do we need more of these floodgates? Are the ones that are currently installed, things change and they're not as necessary? So I don't know, perhaps at some point we could get a better understanding of how these things are coordinated with this board. I'd be curious. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. I do have started the ball rolling, and my intent is to involve them when I get a little closer to retaining an engineering consultant to evaluate these gates further and prioritize them. I understand that was done in the past by a consultant, not as thoroughly as maybe it should have been, as far as evaluating and prioritizing the replacement sequence for the dozen plus. I think there's 14 at least that fall under the conservation department. But getting their input at that point, as well as engineering, which I've sat with Mr. Hurley on briefly to do the same. So moving forward, when these replacements come up, I would like to have that information from the consultant and the input from FECB and engineering.
Excuse me, it's Bill Hurley from engineering. I just want to let you know that I have in front of me the Fairfield Flood and Erosion and Resiliency Board. I guess you'd want to call it potential projects and IDs. And they do list a few tie gates on here: Riverside tie gate, Harbor Road tie gate, and they also have one of repair and upgrade various self-regulating tie gates along the shore. So what Tim might not have known is, before he came on board, and we have probably a quarterly meeting with the Flood and Erosion Board, going over various projects. And when for a couple of months there where we didn't have the conservation director, I had sat down with the Flood and Erosion Board. Just wanted to let everyone know they are familiar with them.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Sure, Tim.
Thank you, Ms. Marmion. Anyone else with questions on this item?
I have a quickie.
I'm sorry, Mr. Stark.
My voice is almost gone, so apologies if you can't hear me. At, in the memo you wrote, Mr. Bishop, it says that access to the Pine Creek Tide Gate is through a town-owned parcel at 380 Pine Creek Ave. Now, Google might have this wrong, but when I looked at it, there's actually a house there. Does the town own the house by any chance, or did you mean to say like a parcel adjacent to 380? I'm just wondering.
Yeah, there was there. I didn't mean the house. The town does not
No.
own, but there is the town-owned parcel does kind of meet in a triangle fashion. At the Mccleary Tide Gate is kind of at the point of that triangle with two other parcels, but access can come from either Pine Creek Avenue or Old Dam through our triangle. I'm not sure if there's been any discussion or easement type access discussions with either of these parcel owners. But obviously, if as we would get close to that level of discussion would have to occur.
Okay, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. Any other questions on this item from the board? Okay, thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you again. Before we move on for the recording secretary, I just want to make sure the record reflects. I did, when I was counting the vote for the last bond resolution, the vote was unanimous. I did call out the names. I think I may have neglected to say Mr. Stark's name, who was a yay. So if we could just make sure the record reflects that. Moving on, the next project included in this bond resolution is from engineering. So welcome back, Mr. Hurley. $250,000 for flood control design work to increase resiliency for Ash Creek to East End Jennings Beach. The backup information for this project begins on page 472. Mr. Hurley, go ahead, please.
Okay. In 2019, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers published Fairfield and New Haven counties' coastal storm risk management study. Fairfield was one of the focused areas, and the object was to reduce damages and manage risk from coastal storms for the town of Fairfield, and then they included the city of New Haven as well. The Army Corps of Engineers analyzed the economic significance, life safety, risk significance, estimated damages, emergency access, and critical infrastructure. A final array of alternatives consisted of protecting a large portion of Fairfield with 7 to 12 foot high dunes, flood walls, pump stations, and other flood control structures. Since the study and the report explored most of the town, the Fairfield Engineering Department and Fairfield Flood and Erosion Resiliency Board proposed to break up the study into smaller sections and explore effective lower cost alternative structures wherever possible to help lower the costs for the most vulnerable areas. This resiliency flood control project design request is endorsed by the Fairfield Flood and Erosion and Resiliency Board, and is a segment of their overall flood protection and resiliency plan. This request is to provide an engineered plan which will close a large gap of current protection and increase the height of existing dunes and berms of approximately 5,000, so just under a mile of 5,000 feet that currently exists between the town-owned beach and the marina area to the Ash Creek open space parcel area on Riverside Road. The plan will investigate flood walls, sheeting, dikes to increase the flood protection and the resiliency for the Riverside and portions of South Benson neighborhoods. In order to progress the project, a cost-benefit analysis is required to confirm that the cost of the proposed flood protection measures and to the neighboring homes to the benefits of that they would no longer be at risk. Currently, just to let you know, currently the town has applied for a CIRCA grant and potentially a FEMA grant to perform this analysis, which would save the town $20,000. So hopefully we'll get that. Preliminary discussions said that we have a good chance of getting that. The expenditure of $250,000 will include the cost, as I mentioned before, to prepare the plans, specifications, bid documents, and required permits. One option would be to construct a dike to provide protection along the high points of mostly town property. The second option would be a design of a flood wall that would be placed along Ash Creek open space and town properties, similar to like a 6-foot high privacy fence. Obviously it'd be solid though, and would include floodgates or tide gates if necessary. The berms and dikes could then be tied into the high points of the ground that exist at the Jennings Beach and at the Ash Creek open space on Riverside Drive. The cost of the professional design service is fairly reliable based on the previous designs. The project is expected to provide step 1 of coastal resiliency for the area of this town. And I have to, though, admit, and you might have noticed it in our long range costs, that even this section, for the whole town, it was like 600 or $700 million to protect the whole town. For this section, the cost estimates are broken down to about 50 to 150 million. And obviously, depending on what cost savings and what is proposed, maybe we can eliminate piles or pump stations and use more natural materials like the dike and the berms rather than the concrete or sheeting. Hopefully the project would be 75% eligible for FEMA grant, but before we can even get anywhere near that stage, we have to, as I said, do the design and then actually do the benefit cost analysis first and then the design. So let's see, anything else? Yeah, the other thing, as I mentioned before, is luckily for this area, the majority of the property involved is town-owned, and so therefore limiting the number of easements that we would need to obtain for the project. Let's see. Yeah, that's about it. If I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hurley. Questions from the board? Mr. Mottola.
Thank you. Thanks, Bill. During Sandy, did the Riverside Drive area flood, or was that kind of spared? Do you recall? In the marina area.
I'm sure it went over because when I was here for Winter Storm Beth back in '92, I know the water had gone over it for then, and that was like a still water elevation of at that time like 9.8, and Sandy was higher.
Okay. Does the South Benson neighborhood, does that include like, like the Colonial Drive area, the back of Colonial Drive, or is that considered a separate area?
Again, if we were to do the whole length of the dike from the marina or the Jennings Beach all the way to Riverside, that would offer the protection because we'd be able to tie into the high point, where that hill is on Riverside by the old Ash Creek Saloon, and I forget what the restaurant is nowadays, but that area there, by Shore, it's by Shoreham Village and Shoreham Terrace.
Right. Thanks for answering the question. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Other questions from the board?
I have one.
Mr. Stark.
How long will the study likely take?
We're figuring about well, it's more than a study. It's going to be design.
Design. Yeah, sorry.
Army Corps of Engineers did the study, so to speak, And so we're figuring probably between 9 and like 15 months, because you will have to get permits.
Would there be any other source of funding besides our own budget and FEMA? You indicated that they would pay for up to 75%.
That would be for the construction,
Okay.
if we get that far.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm just wondering, has anyone on this call started to think about whether we have the wherewithal to fund the 25% if this hits the high end of your cost estimate of 150 million? In other words, 37.5 million-ish dollars. Have we started to think about that at all?
Was that a question to me or to the board?
I guess, yeah, maybe for Jared. I'm not really sure.
Mr. Stark, can you ask your question again?
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
sorry.
you asked something about this in relationship to the
Yeah, if we
cap.
actually build this thing, and I guess since we're designing it, I guess we're gonna probably want to build it, right? And it ends up costing 150 million, and 75% of that is reimbursable by FEMA. That leaves 37.5 million that we have to fund. Where is that in our capital planning universe right now, if anywhere?
Yeah, I think we'd have to address that when when the time comes.
Okay, it's a pretty big number. I mean, I'm taking the high end number, I understand, but, all right, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Thank you, Mr. Stark. Mr. Walsh.
But follow up, Ms. Stark. Yeah, it's a sizable number, and I think we're going to have to look as a town for all sorts of things. I mean, we have people asking for air conditioning at these high schools and schools for $70+ million. We have lots of projects and not lots of money, and we're going to have to prioritize where we are. Kind of like similar to the conversation we had at the capital planning meeting. There's only so much we can do and so much bonding we can do, and fortunately, we're going to have to try to prioritize stuff as we go forward. See another way. So these numbers are scary, especially these big projects.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Yeah, I agree. For Mr. Schmidt, I guess it just raises the question of, the analysis that we looked at in the capital planning workshop was, supposedly the universe, but this is a relatively large potential item, and it may be many years out, but seems like it should be captured in the universe somewhere, because it certainly doesn't seem like it's any less certain than some of the other things we have in the out years. So just a point to consider as we go forward and we think about that plan and how we solidify it. Other questions from the board on this item? Okay, thank you again, Mr. Hurley.
You're welcome. When I will though say that when I said the 9 to 15 months or whatever, I am thinking that this would require also federal permits. So we're probably looking at almost a 2-year design before we went out to bid for it. So the funding would probably be what, year 3 or 4 from now. So just to let you know on that, if that ever came up.
Okay, thank you for that clarification, and thank you again for providing the information. All right, we're going to move on. The next 4 projects included in the bond authorization are from Parks and Recreation. We have the Lake Mohegan restoration from Storm Ida damage, tennis center light replacement, Dwight tennis courts, and Jackie Durrell pavilion upgrades. The backup information for these projects begins on page 475. And we have Parks and Recreation Director, Mr. Anthony Calabrese, here to walk us through these. Mr. Calabrese, how do you want to do this? You want to go through all 4 of them and then take questions, or do you want to take questions as we go along?
I'm happy to take questions as we go along if that's easier, or I could wait. It's up to you. It's probably easier to go as we do them though.
All right, we'll plan to do that. All right, go ahead then. Thank you.
Yep. So the first one that I've got on your, I believe your backup is Lake Mohegan Beach Restoration. I think everybody's familiar with Lake Mohegan. We're just talking the beach area. The beach area was damaged in Storm Ida back in the first week of September, right before Labor Day. So we are looking to try to get that beach restored and back open for operation. We had a couple different companies come in, take a look at the work that needs to be done. They gave us some quotes. Ballpark figures were in the high 300s, low 400s, not counting any engineering designs that would need to be done. So when we put these estimates together, we estimated about $500,000, 75% of which has now been deemed FEMA reimbursable. So we are doing everything we can to follow every possible protocol that we need to follow. Currently, we are pressed for time, so we do have an RFP out right now for the design services, and then once we have that done and we have a design, we'll put the design out for the actual construction, again with the target date and goal of being open by Memorial Day weekend. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions from the board on this item? Mr. Mottola.
Thank you, Anthony. Did you say that it's a done deal that 75% is FEMA reimbursable, or are you still waiting to hear from them?
Well, we've been in talks with them since September. We did submit that $500,000 number as a ballpark figure. We had an initial meeting with them, our finance department and our engineering department, just to go over the specifications. But at that point, it wasn't deemed a state emergency by the governor or by the president at that point. I believe, I've got my dates mixed at this point, but I believe it was about a week and a half ago that they finally did declare it for municipalities in Fairfield County. So it is deemed eligible. It's just a matter now of doing the work and them agreeing to all that, as we've learned along the way.
All right, so you still have to go through more of the process with FEMA. It's eligible, but it's not a done deal. I guess that's the answer to my question.
Correct. Definitely not a done deal at this point, but we're optimistic because they have been involved with us so far.
So what's the problem there? I mean, I see pictures. What happened exactly? It just eroded all the sand? Is that what happened because of the storm?
Yep. So Ida was one of these storms that they tell you comes once every 100 years. It seems that we had 3 this year that I could remember. So we had about 6 inches of rain within, I think, a couple hour period. That rain, just with the terrain up at the lake and the way the hills are, ran right down those hills, hit the parking lot, and then just sped up through the parking lot onto the beach, undermined all the sidewalks there, as you can see from the pictures, and then washed most of the beach into the lake itself. So when a company comes in, what they're going to have to do is dredge out the sand that went into the water, and then ultimately bring in new sand to replenish everything else that was washed away.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Stark.
I hate to make things cost more money, but I'm in the camp of people who think that those storms are going to they have a solid chance of being 3 times a year for the foreseeable future. And so I was wondering, is there any thought given to creating some kind of a diversion to keep water coming down the hill through the parking lot from going into the sand?
Yep, that's a great question. So what we did is add alternate into the design portion of the RFP for the engineering firm to design basically a way to slow the water down and contain it so this doesn't happen.
Is that it, Mr. Stark?
That is it. That's a great answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Curley.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Anthony. Appreciate this. I'm just noticing or reading on the 14 points. You talked about how you had gone out for proposals, only got one response. How does that dovetail with the purchasing policies that we've got in place? I know that we ran into some issues with the Gold Manor project, and I just want to make sure that obviously you want to get this project started as soon as possible and hopefully meet that 8-week timeline and get Mohegan open for Memorial Day. But just want to understand a little bit more about the process.
Sure. So what we did the week following the storm was we reached out to 3 or 4 different groups that do this kind of dredging work and beach restoration work. And we asked them to come take a look at the beach, the damage, and give us an estimate. Of those 3 to 4 companies, only one provided an estimate for us. That estimate came in at around $385,000, again, without the design services. What we did from there is we worked with the purchasing department and basically, I don't want to say we borrowed the scope that company had provided, but we based our scope for the RFP that we're going to put out for the design services based on that. So that's essentially what we put out. So we haven't contracted with that company. That company will have to eventually bid on the construction portion since they don't do the design. So right now we're still in the design phase. We need a company to come in and do that portion for us first.
Thank you. That provides the clarification that I was looking for. Thank you. No further questions.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Other questions from the board? Okay, I don't see anything. I don't see anyone. All right, Anthony, do you want to move on to the tennis center light replacement?
That sounds like a good plan. All right. So for those of you who have been on the board, you've seen this one a few times. Put it nicely. Tennis center lights. We have 6 tennis courts down there now. This is where the bubble is on Old Dam Road. So we do lease that property out year round to Fairfield Indoor Tennis. They've had that lease, as far back as I can remember, I believe sometime into the 80s. But that's when those lights were put in as well. They were put in right around 1989. They haven't been replaced since. We have issues with these lights every year. They're 30 years old. It's just a matter of time before they eventually blow out completely. At the time when these lights were installed, we had 5 courts. Back in 2014, when Fairfield Indoor Tennis partnered up with the town and rebuilt the building down there. Part of rebuilding the building was adding a 6th court. So we have a 6th court there that doesn't necessarily get the lighting that it needs on it. So with this $100,000, we're looking to replace the lights that are down there. Obviously, in the past 30 years, lighting has improved significantly. We do not pay the electric down there. That is paid for by the vendor. So the savings that these lights will provide go to them. Ultimately, again, I think the big push here is that this is our facility that we maintain. If this company doesn't have the lease, when their lease is up, I think in 10 years, ultimately it's our responsibility to make sure that this property is in the right shape. So that's why I'm requesting the $100,000 to replace this. The Board of Selectmen did ask me how much we're spending in repairs each year right now. I ballparked it and I was off. I think I said 20,000. It's actually in the neighborhood of 10 to 12,000 per year that we spend to repair these lights each year. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you, Anthony. Any questions from the board on this one? Mr. Walsh.
Good evening, Anthony. Thanks for being here.
Yep, no problem.
I guess my question is, obviously we'll be doing some form of LED lights that will save the current tenant money, correct?
That's correct.
And we're also going to be providing a 6 tennis court worth of lights, which we weren't supposed to do under the previous agreement, correct?
That would be correct.
Okay, so the tenant seems to be benefiting substantially off of this to some degree, unless we could just do what we're bound to or is there any type of way to get some contribution from the tenant in this regard?
It's something I could discuss with finance and then our town attorney to see if we wanted to have some kind of amended agreement. I would think there's definitely an opportunity.
I think it benefits them greatly because of their cost reduction and also getting a sixth court that they can use for their program. It seems to me that if we get some form of capital contribution, I'm not saying that it's 50%, but some form of contribution from them. I don't know what the LEDs will save them in lighting costs, but I would say it's probably got to be pretty substantial for 30-year-old lights versus, LEDs.
Yep.
Probably reduce their cost by 90%. And over the long term, they would get all the benefit of that plus a six lighted thing. So I think my only, I guess I'm in support of this, but I would like to see the tenant who's going to be benefiting of this show some good faith and maybe give us a contribution of 10,000. I don't know, something like, something.
Yep.
For doing all this.
I'm happy to explore that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Schmidt, maybe you could provide us a follow-up on that at a future meeting in terms of the status of that item. Other questions? Mr. Curley.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. $100,000. This is a 20-year life, principal and interest, but just principal component's going to be 5. Back of the envelope math on this stuff. Did I hear you correctly, Anthony, that because this existing lighting is outdated, regardless of the energy spend or potential savings with the new technology, the annual expense to keep these things operating is 10 to 12,000, right? So I agree with Mr. Walsh. If we can get some type of good faith contribution from our tenant, that would be great. But it's still, I just want to make sure I'm understanding it correctly. It seems like even if we don't get that, the town is better off because we're spending less on principal and interest than we would on the Band-Aid approach to keep the existing lights operating. Is that what?
That is correct. That's what I said. Yeah.
Okay. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Walsh?
One last thing. If they're not willing to give any type of contribution, I don't see any reason to do the sixth court, to light the sixth tennis court. It just makes no sense to pay for those stanchions and whatever, because we're in agreement with them of what we're supposed to give them. So we should just give them what we're supposed to give them pursuant to the lease. So, I don't know how else to say it, but if they want it and they want their program to go into the evening on that sixth course, maybe they should just pay that. So I think that's I think where we need to go with this.
Yep.
Thanks.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I don't really know who to address.
Okay.
I'm not sure who to address.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not sure who to address this to, but I completely agree with Mr. Walsh. The Fairfield Tennis Center gets a considerable amount of revenue from me personally. They charge $100 per court per hour at their normal rate. And so there's a lot of revenue associated with that sixth court. But my question really would be, should we withhold this from the bonding resolution until we figure this out? Or should we just sort of leave Mr. Calabrese to sort of do his best? Or I'm not really sure how we should address it.
Do you want to make a motion to do that, Mr. Stark?
I mean, if Mr. Calabrese isn't going to be terribly offended, yes, I would so move and certainly come back with it.
Mr. Calabrese, do you want to respond to that?
So this is a project I've probably myself presented at least 4 times over the last 6 years, and I know my predecessor presented it a number of times as well. So I'm happy to do whatever you guys would like me to do.
Okay. Yeah, I would. I don't think we're going to step on toes too badly here. So I think it would be smarter to withdraw this from the bonding resolution and come back when we get a better agreement with Fairfield Tennis.
Okay. Mr. Mottola.
I may agree with that, but the answer is really going to be contingent on what their contract says with the town. And, we may be stuck based on the language of the contract and the agreement. And so I'm fine maybe waiting, but I kind of would like to get the project done also. So, Anthony, you want it done for this coming season, or is it something that, can you put up with the old lights for one more year? I guess that's the question. Or when do you want to do this? There's a bubble there right now, right?
Yeah, I would rather get this project done. I know that the lease says that we're responsible for everything outside of the tennis courts, where this would fall. Again, that's not to say, to Mr. Walsh's point before, that we couldn't try to go back and have an amended agreement and get a good faith contribution from them.
Yeah.
So again, and I'm happy to do that. But
I see Mr. Walsh raising his hand. I do want to hear from him.
Mr. Mottola, as usual, I agree with you on this. I think we do have a contractual duty to supply the 5, and maybe that's what we should prove tonight, kind of like what Mr. Stark said. And maybe Mr. Staffstrom, could opine about, if Mr. Calabrese can cut some type of agreement, maybe we could amend, like in a month, if we could cut some deal and get some contribution that will add a 6th if it made sense and amend it. What would be that process, John? So say we approve it and we approve money to do 5. And then in the next month, there's conversations with the tenant telling them that there's a possibility we could do the 6, but we need, contribution that's negotiated by the town. What would be the process to amend our resolution then to increase it?
I think if you decided to decrease this tonight, for example, by 1/6, and I'd have to defer to Mr. Calabrese whether it really would be 1/6 or something different, because obviously once somebody is there and working on it, it's probably more cost effective than coming back to do just one more. But you would, if you reduce this by $15,000 or $20,000, for example, then the additional $15,000 or $20,000 would have to come back through the whole process again. The other option, of course, would be to direct Mr. Calabrese to try to strike the best deal that he can with Fairfield Tennis, with the understanding that if if he doesn't do that, he has the authority to just do the 5 and not the 6th.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. I think that's a great idea, is to authorize the full amount, but allow Mr. Calabrese to negotiate, and if they're unwilling to budge or make a contribution, or at least a contribution that he thinks is reasonable based on the costs of everything, that he only has to do 5. He can do 5, or he can do 6.
Then you put him on the hot spot, but you also let Fairfield Tennis know that they've got to negotiate a deal, or they might only end up with 5.
Okay. Right. Would the resolution say his name, or would it just say the administration?
I think we just leave the resolution the way it is, and I think he understands what you're saying.
I think so too. That's kind of where I was going to ask.
He has to come back here more than periodically.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
Or you can do 6 and just tell them, don't you dare use the 6th court.
Well, not turn it on.
So, or don't turn those lights on, whatever. But I hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, and can I just clarify too, also, if we were to make a motion to reduce this, that affects the whole, the bonding resolution would have to go back to the Board of Selectmen at that point?
I don't think in this case it would, because I think you're not reducing. In my view, sometimes that would have to happen if you're reducing the scope of the project, and the question is whether the project could get done at all if you reduced it. But in this case, I think the intent is just to reduce it by 1/6, because there's sort of 6 stanchions of lights.
No, I understand that, but if we were to actually take an amendment to reduce the amount of this bond resolution, which I don't think we're saying we should do, but that would add that complication to it, correct?
Again, in this case, because I think you could, the other 5 stanchions could be built if you reduce this. I don't think this needs to go back to the Board of Selectmen if you did that. I think it could just go on to the RTM.
All right, okay.
The distinction, I know there's an opinion letter out that we've given before. The distinction is if you reduce something and it's not clear that the project could be get done at all, then it needs to go back to the Board of Selectmen and start over again. But I don't think that's the case here because you could draw the distinction. You've got 6 sort of insular little lights to do.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Mr. DeWitt.
Listen, I think I can remember every one of the 5 times or 6 times or 25 times Anthony's spoken about these lights. And again, you know, it behooves us to keep the facility in good operating shape. We do have a lease there now. Even if tomorrow they decided to terminate their lease and we had to get another lease, we would have to have be good operating order for the next, lessor, right? So, for the minimus amount that I think we would even reduce this, I mean, I think Mr. Calabrese is more than capable of negotiating the deal. And if the 6th, again, just because we bond 100,000, if the number comes in at 85, he spends 85. So I'm in favor of just leaving this the way it is and giving Mr. Calabrese the control of this $100,000 to the best negotiation skills he has.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you.
Anyone else have comments on this item?
I would agree.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. All right. Anthony, looks like you dodged a bullet on that one there. Okay.
2 more to go.
All right, so why don't you go ahead and move on to the Dwight tennis courts?
Okay, Dwight tennis courts. So I had moved this one up on the waterfall chart. I had Fairfield Woods ahead of this. We resurfaced Fairfield Woods last year, I believe, or the year before. And that one's held up pretty well, where Dwight hasn't. So I flip-flopped them on the waterfall chart. Basically, they're the same size courts. There's 4 courts there. So with Dwight, what I'd like to do is we'd like to rebuild these courts using the post-tension concrete, which is what we've done with the last several large court replacements that we've done. You guys will probably recall that we recently redid Tomlinson Middle School into post-tension. We did Ludlow High School into post-tension, and we did Fairfield Ward's Lake Court into post-tension. And all have turned out really nice. They hold up. They get a 20-year warranty against cracks and a 10-year warranty for the lines. An asphalt court, which is what we primarily have around town now, which is what the Dwight courts are, only lasts between 10 to 12 years. After the first 2 years, they typically need to be resurfaced. When we resurface 4 courts like this, it typically runs in the neighborhood of $60,000. That was what we paid the last time we did Fairfield Woods. So while we will pay a little more up front for the post-tension, in the long term, this is the technology, for lack of a better word, that we should be moving towards with tennis courts from what we're seeing in the industry. So happy to take any questions, and I think the pictures speak for themselves, unfortunately. We haven't shut these courts down. They do get a lot of use from the neighborhood, believe it or not, even though they are up in Greenfield Hill, where it's not as dense, but Ludlow High School does use these courts for, I believe, their JV program as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Questions from the board on this one? Mr. Curley.
Real quickly, Anthony, just how long does it take for a project like this to get completed, and how long would these courts be out of service or unavailable for the public?
It's about a 16-week process to rip up, lay the concrete out, let it cure, and then you need temperatures over 50 degrees day and night in order to surface them. And that was kind of the issue we ran into with Tomlinson. Was they started the project, if I remember correctly, like in September or October. They were able to lay the cement, but they couldn't line until the next May when it finally got warm enough. So ideally, we'd love to do these, in the June time frame where they're hopefully back online for September, mid-September if we're lucky.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Mr. Walsh.
And I definitely think there's a need to, obviously the pictures speak for themselves, as you stated, about the shape of these tennis courts and the fact that the high schools need them for their program. My one fear, just is a little fear that's out there, is I know that the Board of Ed is looking at the Dwight property now and what to do with it, and whether to keep it or whether not to keep it. And voting for this, if they decide not to keep it and the town decides to do something else with that property, including sell it, we just have to all accept that we could be, not getting full use out of this, but I would hope that we would try to keep use of those tennis courts, at least for the program at the high schools, and get our 20 years worth of life out of them. So it's just a concern. I think I can get over the concerns because we need them for the program and we don't know really what's going to happen. And I don't know how long. Well, Mr. Peterson just comes on just when I need him. So I don't know if you have any more information, Mr. Peterson, that you could offer our board about whether there's been any further discussion since the last time we talked about it, or whether it's still all up in the air. I presume it's up in the air, but I don't know.
If I may, with the chair's permission, Jeff Peterson for the Board of Education. A little early for me, but there has been no further discussion about anything to do with the long-term fate of Dwight since the capital planning workshop. And okay. I want to stress that only remains in the highly theoretical phase.
Sure.
We're not near having those discussions yet, although we know they are coming down the pike.
Okay, and I respect that position. So as I said, I'm going to take the leap of faith personally. These tennis courts, prove them, but it's always in the back of my mind based on knowing that there's theoretical things going on right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Other questions from the board? All right. Okay, so it looks like we can move on. Mr. Calabrese, Jackie Durrell Pavilion upgrades. I know we've, this is another one we've heard about before, but give it to us again.
You got to say, I'm consistent if nothing else. So consistent, persistent, both. So Jackie Durrell, kitchen and restroom upgrades is what we're looking for here. We increased probably theoretically not enough with the way the economy's been going right now, but we did keep a 3% escalator in it, which brought that number to 103,000. What we'd like to do, and I'm sure you guys have all been in Jackie Durrell in the last couple of years, and you've seen that we redid the ballroom, and it's kind of whitewashed, and it's very beachy and beautiful. And we have this real eyesore of a kitchen that you're sitting there, you look straight in there with its brown, grimy floors and run down equipment. And then, you have to go use the restroom. You're walking back into a time warp. So the goal here would be to upgrade those portions of the building, make them more accessible, ADA accessible to the extent that we are able to. And really, with Penfield coming offline, I think this comes at a good time for us to do this project and make Jackie Durrell, the gem of that beach. So again, happy to take any question.
Thank you. Mr. DeWitt.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. The theme tonight, I'm advocating for Anthony Calabrese. I could not agree more. My only question, Anthony, is this: in doing this work, with the potential of Penfield coming offline, what kind of downtime are we talking about?
This would be a winter project for our guys, which is how we did the ballroom. So that building, since it's not insulated and it doesn't have heat, right. We essentially shut it down in October. So they'll have October to the beginning of April to get the project done. I think where I thought you were going to go with that question was to ask me what we're going to do with the parking. with the project at Penfield or whatever's going to happen there. And I was just going to state that we would treat it the same way we did when we were down closed for 5 years before, and just have people park across the street and then walk across.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad I was a good lead-in man for you. No, I'm fully advocating for this. We've heard about this before. We heard about it when we did the ballroom. I think, I love your description. It has a rustic style of its own. I love it. I mean, listen, I understand Penfield Pavilion and what it is, and Jackie Durrell what it is, and it's really like a part of Fairfield. I can't imagine that beach being without Jackie Durrell, and I for what I think is a relatively small amount of money for something that generates some substantial revenue. I couldn't be advocating for this more. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Any other comments from the board? All right. Mr. Calabrese, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, stand by. All right. So the next two items included in this bond resolution are school projects. We have $996,370 for the boiler replacement at Burr Elementary and $265,329 for an elevator replacement at Fairfield Ludlow High School. The backup information for these projects begins on page 491. And we have Board of Education member Jeff Peterson and Executive Director of Operations for Fairfield Public Schools, Angeles Papa George, here to walk us through these. Mr. Peterson, sorry if I didn't get all your correct titles in there. I think you're chair of the Board of or the chair of the Finance Committee for the
Finance Committee of the Board of Education. That's fine.
And you're obviously the liaison to the Board of Finance. So welcome, and I'll turn it over to you gentlemen to walk us through these.
Well, I'd be happy to send it right over to Angelos. I know he's been waiting with bated breath.
Absolutely. So good evening, everyone. I know with the interest of time, I'll try to go quickly and answer all the questions I can for you this evening. The first project we have is, as you said, the boiler. Just to clarify, it's the boiler and burner, so it's the boiler burner combination for Burr Elementary School. These boilers were installed in 2004 when the building was built, which makes them 18 years old, which is just under our 20-year life expectancy of this type of boiler burner, which is approximately 20 to 25 years. The boilers that we're looking to replace, mainly because of the unique situation with them, they are located on the second floor at Burr Elementary School. Whereas if we had a boiler in a lower level boiler room and we were showing signs of wear, tear, and leaking like we are at the Burr School, we would be able to deal with them and work with them. Even with them leaking, we'd be able to do some repairs and make them safe and usable. But with these boilers being that they're on the second floor situated over a gym storage unit, every time we leak, we're getting a rain shower effect in the lower area below them, which makes them very difficult. One is definitely further along in the failing than the other one, but again, due to the fact that they're located on the second floor, we thought cost efficiency would be to do both of them since they are both the same vintage at the same time. Looking at these boilers, we're looking at most likely needing to bring in special equipment and cut holes through the backside of the walls of the boiler room on the second floor and bring them out through the gym area and lower them down to the lower floor and get them out of the building that way. To get the new boilers in, there's a couple of options we're looking at right now, one being a high efficiency boiler burner, which would be a smaller unit, not a sectional like we have now, and we would most likely be able to get them up through a staircase or the existing hole in the wall if need be to take the old ones out. There used to be some requirements that had us require dual fuel burners so they could burn gas or oil. There used to be incentives from the gas company. Those are no longer in place. And there used to be incentives from the state for doing that. And those are no longer in place. So by eliminating those, it gives us the opportunity to look at a high efficiency single burn gas unit. I think that's kind of a nutshell of what this project is entitled for. I'll be happy to answer any questions on it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Papa George. Appreciate that summary. Mr. DeWitt.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a particularly frustrating project for me. When I was on the board, my first year on the board was in 2007. And one of the first issues that I remember come before us is that this installation was installed so that they couldn't do maintenance. Like they had to cut a hole in the walls. It was ridiculous. And one of our members, no longer a member of the board, coined a phrase. He goes, "I want to know who I can sue over this," right? And it was the beginning of a long discussion over the last 15 years about building committees and all this. So, you know, I'm supportive of this project, but I got to tell you, it's frustrating to me that we're spending $1 million on this relatively new school. I mean, 2004, right? It's not, you know, but it's testimony to the fact that we really got to watch these building committees and all. But I understand why we have to do this. And, you know, Mr. Papa George, you know, Godspeed on this one, because I bet getting this stuff out isn't going to be any easier than getting the new stuff in. So good luck on that one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, Mr. DeWitt. Other questions from the board on this one? Ms. Marmion.
Hi, thank you very much for that. It sounds like this is really a priority. Any issues, you want to do this summer, I believe. Any issues? I don't know where we get boilers from, supply-wise. You know, are we at risk for not having these in time for the summer?
At this point, we are cutting it very close. We're probably about 14 weeks for delivery once a contract is signed. So that's, again, one of the reasons we're looking at the high efficiencies, because they are package units and maybe more readily available than the sectionals.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marmion. Mr. Mottola.
Thank you. And just to follow up on Mr. DeWitt's point, and I agree with him. Full disclosure, I was on that building committee, and we had engineers and a couple of architects. Yes, you can blame me. We had engineers and architects on it, and you know, I don't remember the discussion about it, but Mr. Papa George, to the extent that you can opine on it, is there any benefit to have a boiler system on the second floor for a school like this, or is it? And I don't really know the answer.
Unfortunately, I was not in the district at the time, and I don't know what the thinking was behind doing this. It's the first I've seen.
Don't give him an out, Angelus.
It's with my years here, my years with Norwalk and other districts, this is the first I've seen it.
Yeah, okay. All right. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mottola. Yeah, I mean, not to give John a break here, but it just doesn't seem like I wouldn't have thought the building committee would come up with that design. I mean, I'm sure we had professionals putting this thing together, and it is somewhat mystifying. Mr. Curley.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So obviously the placement's an issue, and if I heard you correctly, we've got to cut a hole in the wall to allow access for the old unit to come out and the new unit to come in. I guess my question is, the new boiler is also gonna need to be replaced 20 years from now, and I wonder if we're cutting a hole in the wall, is now the time to put some type of access door in so that we're not cutting a hole in the wall again 20 years from now.
Part of our funding request is engineering services to look at all those types of things. Once again, the what we are hoping to move forwards with is a high efficiency, which is so it would take the boiler, which is about the size of a small car right now, and make it to more of the size of what you would find in almost what you would find in your house. It's a lot smaller, easier to work around. It's not only is it getting the equipment in and out, but also the space that they are currently housed in is so tight that it makes it very difficult to pull a panel off or open a door to look in. So getting a smaller piece of equipment that's a higher efficiency, I think would help us in the long run as well.
So is that to suggest that the smaller equipment would not need a hole in the wall and could
Correct.
perhaps?
Yep,
Okay.
they would be able to go right up the staircases that are currently there.
Okay, so we wouldn't need to cut a hole in the wall.
To get the old ones out is what we believe is going to be the.
Okay, but if we're discarding the old unit and there's no scrap value, I imagine that perhaps it could be cut up and save the wall from having to be deconstructed and reconstructed.
There is that possibility. We're looking at every aspect of it. We may even try to pull the burners off and take the sections apart. And there's a multiple ways to go about taking it out. We're looking at the most cost effective and the safest way to do it.
Understood. Okay. Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Curley. Other questions from the board on this item? Okay, I see none. All right, Mr. Papa George, do you want to move on to the elevator?
So the second project you have is the elevator modernization for Fairfield Ledlow High School. This elevator is located over by the gymnasium area, and it services the lower area of the building, which includes the art rooms, the auto shop areas, some computer labs, and that other smaller area of the building below. Other than the staircase, the only other way to get down to that level, if you're unable to work through the stairs, without this elevator, would be to go outside and around the driveway and back into the building on the other side. That being said, right at the beginning of the school year, we found ourselves in that predicament for a small amount of time because this elevator was down. No one has been able to, including the state, give me the actual date that this elevator was installed. But based on the vintage, we're looking at it probably being most likely original to the building. And as I said, it was down for a small time at the beginning of the school year. There was a need to remove a board from this unit, and we actually, for lack of a better term, they sent it to a gentleman who works out of his garage and kind of rebuilt the board and sent it back to us with we don't guarantee it works, but we're pretty sure it will work. There's no boards, there's no equipment that we can purchase to get this machine working again if it does go down. Even our elevator PM contractor, who says when they demo elevators, they usually keep equipment they know is not available anymore for elevators. And again, they had nothing in stock that they could use on this either. That being said, I know it's kind of funny they send it to a guy in his garage, but it is state inspected and certified that it's safe and operational at this point. However, we felt that it was at this point that we should replace it before we find ourselves in a position where anyone not able to use the stairs is required to go outside and around to access the lower levels of classrooms. If there's any questions on this one.
Thank you, Mr. Papa George. Questions on this item? Okay, I don't see any questions on this item. Thank you, Mr. Papa George. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any other questions from the board? So that is all the projects contained in this bond resolution. Do we have any other questions on the bond resolution itself from members of the board? Okay, I see none. So we can bring this to a vote then. All right. All those in favor of adopting the bond resolution entitled a resolution appropriating $3,717,899 for the cost of certain non-recurring capital projects and authorizing the issuance of bonds to finance such appropriations. Please raise your
Excuse me,
hand.
Miss Charlton. I
Yes.
don't know if you wanted to see if there's any public comment first.
Oh, I should have mentioned that there is no public comment. No one is in the
Okay.
chat room. So,
Sorry to
thank you.
interrupt.
No, no worries. Yeah, we have, no one's requested to speak. All right, so we can go ahead and vote then. All those in favor? All right, Mr. Curley, Mr. Mottola, Mr. DeWitt, Ms. Marmion, Mr. Testani, Mr. Stark, Ms. Leclerc, Ms. Charlton, Mr. Walsh. I don't see Mr. Walsh. Okay, it is unanimous. The motion carries. All right, thank you, everyone. Moving on to item 6. Can I have a motion to adjourn? Mr. Curley, seconded by Mr. Testani. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it. Good night.
Good night, all.
Good night.